So, good evening. I am calling to order the regular meeting of the Ross Town Council, Thursday, May 13, 2021. Has the agenda been posted?
We should take roll call first.
Sorry, roll call.
Good evening, Council. Councilmember Breckus
Excuse me.
and Councilmember Kircher,
Here.
Councilmember Cool
Here.
and Councilmember McMillan
Yep, here.
and Mayor Robbins.
Here.
Okay.
And the next is, has the agenda been posted?
Yes, it has.
Item number 3, Town Council recognition of Councilmember Julie McMillan for her service as mayor. Julie, thank you for serving as mayor. I will start off and make a few comments. Julie's year as mayor coincided with unprecedented catastrophes, not of her making. First, there was COVID, then the horrendous killing of George Floyd, then catastrophic fires throughout the state. Now there's a drought. And through all of this, Julie has been an exceptional mayor for the town. She led us through a year of Zoom council meetings, and public participation actually increased. She delivered a powerful and inspiring speech at the town Black Lives Matter event on the Common. She's worked tirelessly on fire prevention, serving on the newly formed Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority. It's been quite a year, and Julie, you've handled it gracefully and brilliantly. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Would anyone else like to make some comments? Councilmember Breckus.
Yes, most of the time we just say that being the mayor is, maybe an extra meeting and really largely ceremonial, but you really had a lot of challenges. And I know it was very difficult for everybody, including staff, but you did a great job of pivoting quickly. So thank you for a great year and a good job. Thanks.
Thanks, Elizabeth.
Comment?
Councilmember Kircher.
I join in all the comments so far. Also, I think it's important to recognize that in addition to being a great mayor, Julie does so much else in the way of work for the community. I think her work for the JPA was mentioned, but the Climate Action Initiative and so forth. It was a huge challenge, I think, and she handled it very well. So very grateful.
Thank you, Bill.
Councilmember Cool.
Well, I told people, starting when Julie got on the council, that she was going to be a great mayor. And I'm not necessarily good at predicting things, but this time I hit it right on the head. I thought your response to some of the many problems that developed during the year was just outstanding, keeping things in good spirits for people, keeping the community together and rolling. And I think we owe you a great debt of gratitude for the way you kept the town going during a very tough year.
Thank you, Beach. It was all thanks to you and the staff and Joe and Linda. It wasn't just me. It was a tough year all the way around. And, everyone worked very, very hard together, and hopefully we will, we won't be around in 100 years when the next pandemic hits. So it's behind us. It's good.
Joe, did you have any comments?
Yeah, I was going to echo. There's been no more challenging time in, 50, 100 years to be in government and to be a mayor than this. And every issue you just handled brilliantly. Your dedication, your flexibility, and addressing every issue and then going beyond on topics, and are remarkable, and it was just outstanding. And every single person that contacted you you provide them very good service. So thank you for staff. You helped us so much through it too, as we worked our way through all these issues. So thank you for an incredible year.
Thank you. I really look forward to when we can all be together in person without a mask.
It might be soon. You never know.
Hmm?
Well, thank you, Julie.
Oh, and I got a beautiful orchid. Thank you. It's so pretty, Linda. Thank you so much. And I also got, this is the only time I've touched the gavel because I never had a gavel. So I'm going to pound this gavel on the table right now. There we go. Thank you. That's lovely.
Well, that's an appropriate gift. Since you couldn't use it, at least you have it. Thank you. Moving on to item number 4, the minutes. Were there any, Linda, were there any edits to the minutes, or can we have a motion to approve them as is?
I didn't hear from any council on any edits.
Any council members with edits? And if not, can there be a motion, please?
Move to approve.
Second,
Second,
Okay, and let's take the vote. Councilmember Breckus
Aye.
and Councilmember Kircher,
aye.
Councilmember Cool,
Aye.
Councilmember McMillan,
aye.
and Mayor Robbins.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
Then we are at item number 5, the demands. Have the demands been met?
Yes, they have.
Thank you. Item number 6, open time for public expression. This is limited to 3 minutes per speaker. This is on items that are not on our agenda, and the council is not able to have a discussion about items that aren't agendized. Are there any members of the public who would like to offer a comment, public expression? If so, please raise your hand.
Mayor, I'm not seeing any raised hand.
No, nor am I. So thank you. So now to the mayor's report. Spring brings renewal, and this year, after 14 months of COVID restrictions, renewal is especially welcome. Venturing out is now possible, particularly with rising vaccination rates and declining numbers of new cases. After starting this week, starting this week, children ages 12 to 15 can be vaccinated. The risk of becoming ill with COVID has decreased dramatically. Does this translate into a return of our beloved town events, such as the 4th of July picnic and the September town dinner? Will the town council resume meeting in town hall? There aren't answers to these questions yet, but things are moving in the right direction. Last year, the answers to these questions were all unequivocally no. This year looks better. It's likely that some form of 4th of July celebration on the Common will be permitted. The town is waiting until June 15 to hear updated California guidelines about social interactions. Given the low COVID transmission rate outdoors, it seems likely that families will be able to picnic on the Ross Common. A decision about whether the celebration can include food vendors or musicians will be made in mid-June. Similarly, it's possible that the town dinner, held in late September, might be permitted this year. Like the 4th of July celebration, decisions about whether to hold the dinner and what modifications might be necessary will be made closer to the actual date. Finally, in-person town council meetings in town hall will resume when it's considered safe. The Zoom meetings over the past year have been surprisingly successful. Workshops, staff presentations, council deliberations, and public input all have proceeded smoothly. Attendance at these meetings is at an all-time high thanks to the convenience of attending online. The council is looking into ways to continue to have an online meeting option once in-person meetings resume. This could give residents the choice of attending and participating either in person or online. Item number 8 is council committee and liaison reports. Are there any committee or liaison reports?
Can I ask a question of you?
Yes.
Is it possible that there's a bear roaming the town of Ross? Could you speak to that?
Wait, you're asking me to answer to that?
Yes.
Well, we did hear that there was a bear in San Anselmo at Taco Jane's. I'm not aware that the bear has moved on to Ross. Is the bear in Ross?
I don't know. I just thought I'd ask the question and wasn't sure whether that could be included in your mayor's update.
I see. That is a good update, that there's a bear in the neighborhood. It's just not our neighborhood as far as we know. Moving on to council committee and liaison reports. Are there any committee or liaison reports? Councilmember Cool?
Yes, I serve on the MCCMC's Homeless Committee, which met yesterday. And I thought it was worthwhile to alert you that this committee is very anxious to take some action because of some failings of our county homeless activities to provide some needed, particularly needs in terms of having counselors available during the times that homeless people are waiting to get housing vouchers. And I want to alert you to the fact that each of the towns is shortly going to be formally asked to contribute 5% of what it receives from the federal American Rescue Program, I think it's called, that each town and city is going to receive from the federal government. And we are going to all be asked to provide 5% of those funds to an effort to continue to provide care workers to provide services to the homeless people who are in that situation of kind of caught between living in a tent and waiting to have permanent housing. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Beach. Are there other reports? Councilmember McMillan?
Yes, I just have 3 quick announcements. On Thursday, May 27th from 5 to 6 p.m. In conjunction with the MCCMC Climate Action Committee and Bay Area Cool the Earth, there will be an Electrify Your Ride Zoom call that will explain why it's good to drive an electric vehicle. Transportation is our biggest contributor to pollution. The next announcement I have is on Wednesday, June 2nd, and probably Mark Brown will be speaking about this, Executive Officer Mark Brown from the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority. There will be a workshop for the Ross Valley on Wednesday, June 2nd from 5 to 7:30 p.m. to talk about hardening your home, defensible space, evacuation, et cetera, getting prepared for what will probably be a really unprecedented wildfire season given the drought. And lastly, on June 14th, Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority, in conjunction with Fire Safe Marin, will be offering a chipper day for residents of Ross. And people need to make a reservation, and the chipper will come to your home and pick up your debris. So it's really good incentive to do that defensible space and vegetation management around your own property. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other reports? Thank you. Number 9, staff and community reports. Town Manager Chin.
Thank you, Mayor Robbins and council members. As we're all aware, and Councilmember McMillan just pointed out, we're in the wildfire season, and they're starting earlier than ever, already having our red flag warnings in early May. It is the town's and every property owner's responsibility to help make the community safer, removing all grasses, weeds, dead trees, and shrubs around your property and along the roadways that are safety hazards. I was going to, in the morning after, and we'll have some townwide emails going out, are going to list some of the programs that Councilmember McMillan mentioned. But obviously it's important that everybody it's everybody's role to help get ready for the fire season. And we'll have a presentation shortly by Executive Officer Mark Brown of the Wildfire Authority and Ross Valley Fire Chief Jason Weber. But keep your lookout for information in the townwide newsletter and emails. Recreation, we are looking forward to Ross Rec being able to expand outdoor programs again this summer. Some programs already have waiting lists, but others still have spots left. Please look into our guides and get your kids or signed up. And also we have some adult classes in there also. So anyhow, and that's the report.
Thank you. 9B, Ross Property Owners Association. Is there a representative to give an RPOA report? I'm not seeing,
I don't see any raised hands, and I'm not sure who
okay,
I would be looking for.
fine. We'll move on to number 10, the consent agenda. There are 3 items on the consent agenda. Do any members of the council want to take any of the items off of the consent agenda? Would any members of the public want to take any item off of the consent agenda?
No hands raised, Mayor.
Thank you. Then is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Move to
So
approve.
moved.
I'll
So we have a
second.
vote. Okay. Let's take the vote. How do you vote? Councilmember Breckus?
Aye.
Councilmember Kircher?
Aye.
Councilmember Cool?
Aye.
Councilmember McMillan?
Aye.
And Mayor Robbins?
Aye.
And the consent agenda, items A to C, is approved.
Thank you. Item number 11, presentation by Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority Executive Officer Mark Brown and Ross Valley Fire Chief Jason Weber on Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority projects for fiscal year 21-22.
Thank you, Mayor. And Mark and I have a very short presentation. We'll just pull up some slides. So you don't have to look at me. You can enjoy a slideshow instead. So thank you for having us here tonight. And we'll kind of cover a few key items. One of the reasons we want to be back in front of you is, to talk about the good work we've done thus far in a relatively short period of time and where we're headed into the next year. So Mark's going to share his screen, which has the PowerPoint on it. And just as a reminder, there's, for no better description, there's 3 buckets essentially of funding after the whole revenue. So as you recall, we proposed creation of a 17-member organization that could strategically and collectively reduce some of the overhead and redundancy of everybody doing it on their own and try to make the county safer from wildfire. And that was the creation of the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority. It ultimately led to successful funding from our voters in the county at 10 cents a square foot to generate revenue. So that revenue comes in and 60% of it goes towards the core or overall area. And then there's 2 other buckets, if you will, that are each 20% of that revenue that's generated from the local agency. And that 20% goes towards, and Mark, if you want to go to the next slide, that 20% goes towards Defensible Space Program. And right below the highlighted line is the town of Ross. And the other bucket, 20%, is local. So locally controlled by your council for high priority projects that may not be included in the core. So a little bit about what the core is. Next slide, Mark. So the greater Ross Valley is one of the 5 geographical areas in the county. So to do this, we broke the county into 5 geographical areas that kind of lighter green to the top right of the picture is Novato. This greater Santa Fe, which includes Marinwood, is in red. And then we're part of that purple area. And that's the central Marin area. So that includes Corte Madera, Larkspur, Kentfield Fire District, Ross, San Anselmo, Sleepy Hollow, and Fairfax. And the intent of the Corps is, wildfire doesn't know boundaries. It doesn't stop at a city limit or a property line, and nor should our planning efforts and our collaborative work, fuels work. So the intent of that core area is to fund projects that have a greater good across the region from wildfire protection. 10% is the cap for supporting the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority's operations of administrative costs and other items for that. And then the balance of that is broken up and goes to the greater Ross Valley. So working with our partner agencies this year, our focus was really the house out and getting people out alive. And so predominantly the work is being done on evacuation routes and, right around homes. We're also put some money aside to work on a shaded fuel break that's adjacent to all of our communities. Predominantly that's land that's owned and managed by the Marin Municipal Water District, Marin County Open Space. So looking at a buffer zone, if you will. And then the second piece, our third item that we're covering, and we're shifting where that funding is coming from based on a conversation today, but that's defensible space software. And, we want this to be intuitive. We want it to be educational. We want it to be something that when the resident is interacting with one of our defensible space inspectors in the field, they're left with kind of a to-do list if they're not compliant, and something anyone can follow with pictures, links to a lesson about home hardening or the plant choices, etc. So that software we anticipate rolling out here in the next few months. Pretty excited about it. Then Fire Safe Marin is also, as a partner agency, is funded, and I heard mention earlier of Chipper Days, the public education piece, and then another item is grants for seniors and low income, and we're looking at a local grant program with some of the local dollars also here in Ross that don't necessarily have age or income thresholds, and we'll work through that shortly. And I'm sure Mark's going to talk a little bit about the evacuation work we're doing and recent software we purchased to assist in those evacuations. Next slide. Okay, so this is the Defensible Space Inspection Program that we talked a little bit about. This is an example of a door hanger that would be left if somebody wasn't home. That would have a QR code that they could then scan and get the report on their residence. Also recognizing not everybody has the technology whereabouts to use a QR code. We would have the ability to print, mail, or email. Again, our focus on the D-Space program is really about education, and at this point in the early on years of MWPA, we're also participating in a pooled resource for more efficiency. So we're working with all the agencies in the Ross Valley and County Fire, and we have 25 defensible space inspectors hired collectively with a shared leadership position, and we're able to do a lot more with that. And last year we completed about 10,000 inspections across all those agencies, and a good deal of those were Ross.
She's got her
Next
barbecue on, right? Ask her.
Next slide, Mark. Thanks. So then the Ross, that other bucket I spoke about is local funding. So the agencies, which Ross is one of, and the Ross Valley Fire Department came together and are putting a position up, emergency preparedness coordinator. And that position will help us with, preparing people for all sorts of emergencies, including obviously wildfire. And again, we're able to do that as a group and collectively share that position. Other projects are fuel reduction projects. So we'll be looking at either city or town-owned properties that may need some work, uninhabited parcels that are adjacent to homes that are problematic. We'll use things like goats. That's just a tool in the toolbox, but there are many others. And I think last year we did a lot of good work with the evacuation routes. Sorry, as I'm trying to think through that. And we did work on Baywood, Crest, Upper Road West, and Woodhaven. And if you've had a chance to see any of those projects, that's the kind of work we're looking at expanding substantially with our core dollars this year, and make our evacuation routes safer. So with that, one of the kind of next steps is we'll be working on identifying those local projects and getting their compliance work started from the environmental perspective and have those completed in the next year. And then also working on the details of a grant program. And ideally, it would match grant programs that would be available in San Anselmo and other Ross Valley Fire Agency member agencies, since we're cooperating and kind of using that shared disaster coordinator position to help manage those grants. So Mark will talk a little bit about what's happening on the bigger level. And obviously, Councilmember McMillan has been a wonderful resource, not only to the town, but also on the board and moving this forward. So I'll thank her for the leadership and congratulations on the award for the last year.
Thank you, Jason. As mentioned, Mark Brown, Executive Officer for Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority, and I'll echo the comments that were all made towards Councilmember McMillan. She's been such an important resource and just great insight as a director for the MWPA, and I really appreciate working with her. And so for the overall planning, I just wanted to give a picture of the types of dollars that we're talking about for the entire county. We will have $10.6 million dedicated to core projects. Then we have the $3.9 million each for the local D-space or D-space evaluations throughout the county. And another $3.9 million for local mitigation projects that Jason talked about. So we're looking at a total of $18.4 million that's going towards wildfire safety in the county of Marin. And we feel that this the type of organization we are opens us up for several federal and state grants. In fact, we are going to be applying for a CAL FIRE fire prevention grant to help fund low-income D-space work, and we are applying for $1.98 million. So as we progress, we feel like we're really going to be able to use increase our return on investment for our taxpayer dollars. When we look at our overall planning, we are pushing hard now, building our work plan and budget so that we can have it approved by June 1. Jason gave a great flavor of the type of projects that we're working on. As he mentioned, I wanted to expand on the evacuation route work that we've been doing. First is the implementation of Zone Haven. We are about 95% done with approving the local evacuation zones across the county. Once those get approved, we'll be having a Know Your Zone campaign and we have already worked with and connected with the PIOs for each of the areas so that we can have a consistent message through that. This will also tie into any agencies that are having evacuation drills. It will be coordinated through our Zone Haven application. And we're also working with the Marin County Sheriff's Office and all the law enforcement agencies through this rollout for evacuation signs for the residents. And this is something the law enforcement throughout the state has been using as a tool that residents can actually put a sign up on their house saying that they've evacuated. And so this will help make the law enforcement personnel or the other personnel that are helping with evacuations more efficient. They'll see that a house has already been evacuated. They can move on to the next house. Another important aspect of what we're doing is our evacuation route risk assessment. And this is a tool for us to evaluate all of our evacuation routes throughout the county, give them a rating, and so we can identify which ones need the work the most. What's interesting about the tool that we're developing, though, it's not a snapshot in time. It's going to be adjustable. So after we go and do work on a particular evacuation route, we'll be able to input the data and it'll spit out another rating for that route. So we'll actually be able to see the net gain that we've had from our work and continue to focus our energies where they need to go. And Joe, I really appreciate the words that you said during your report out. I couldn't have said it better myself. The importance of our residents stepping in, taking responsibility, and creating that house out approach. Awesome. I love it. And then that ties into our community workshops and public education. Like Councilmember McMillan said, the one for Central Marin or Ross Valley is on June 2nd. Santa Fe's is going on right now, and I had a chance to listen in prior to this. It's going very well. We've had great interaction with the Santa Fe and the West Marin webinars with lots of questions being asked by the members of the public, and they're getting their answers right from their subject matter experts. And I'll just close with focusing on our residents, understanding the wildfire threat, understanding their responsibility, and the understanding the strengths of our communities. This is some of its parts. And if everybody does their part, our entire community is stronger. So thank you, and available for any questions.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions from council members? Councilmember McMillan.
I just have a comment. Mark and Chief Weber and Executive Officer Brown have done amazing work. There's 17 members of this JPA. We have never met in person. It's all been done via Zoom. We hired legal counsel via Zoom. We hired the executive officer via Zoom. We hired an outside law firm who's an expert on CEQA via Zoom. We're in the process of retaining expert consultant in CEQA via Zoom. So it's remarkable how much work has been done to get this agency up and running and doing all this amazing work. And remember, this was just approved in March of 2020. So it's only been, what, 14 months? It's amazing. I'm so impressed. Thank you. Thank you both for all your work.
Thank you. Are there any other comments or questions from council members? Are there any questions from members of the public?
I don't see any raised hands, Mayor.
Thank you. Then thank you very much. That was a very helpful presentation.
Thanks for
We'll now move on to item 12. Yes, we're glad you could come. Item 12, Town Council consideration of providing a preference to the Marin County Flood Control District regarding multiple design options for Frederick Allen Park as part of the district's flood control project. Rich Simonich will lead this.
Thank you, Mayor
Our
Robbins.
public director.
Yes, Rich Simonich, Public Works Director. Thank you, Mayor Robbins and members of the Town Council. I have a PowerPoint presentation tonight, so let me share my screen and we can move on with it. And from the beginning. Okay, so tonight we are finally, after I think we've been looking at this for a little over 3 years in one form or another, the flood control, the Corte Madera Creek Flood Risk Management Project in its various iterations. But the underlying point of discussion is the treatment of Frederick Allen Park, or the non-treatment of it, as the Marin County Flood Control District moves forward with their project on the Corte Madera Creek Flood Risk Management Project. So tonight we're going to just go right into looking at the project descriptions for the two main points of consideration: Alternative 1 and the proposed project, and a little bit, of course, about Alternative 2 and Alternative 3, which are very similar to the proposed project with some slight differences. Then we'll go to the project issues and some comparisons, and look at the flood risk reduction for the alternatives and the proposed project. And we'll take a quick look at other issues and go over briefly the results of the questionnaire. And then we'll open it up to discussion and questions for staff and comments from the public. So first, Alternative 1. It's not going to change or alter Allen Park in any way or the mature woodland trees. There will be 4 additional enlarged fish resting pools cut in and installed into the existing concrete channel through the length of the channel from the tennis courts up to the post office. The fish ladder will be removed. Concrete channel, or the creek channel bottom from the fish ladder upstream to the Lagunitas Bridge will be modified in some ways to accommodate the change in slope, but it will remain a natural looking channel. Negligible construction impacts to the community from Alternative 1. And some folks have asked, well, what's Alternative 1 going to look like? Well, there it is. Nary a stone or leaf will be turned or touched in the park. It'll look just like it does today with the concrete channel there behind the shrubs. The only construction that we will see in Ross is the natural creek channel modifications between the Lagunitas Bridge and the current fish ladder, a little bit downstream from the post office. The proposed project, so we spend a bit more time describing the proposed project because it is a considerable change to Frederick Allen Park the tree habitat that is currently there. So with this proposed project, as it's called in the EIR, Flood Control District intends to remove sections of the existing concrete channel and reconfigure, regrade Allen Park with and the flood control property on the other side of the channel to provide a more naturalized setting that improves habitat, fish passage, and public access to the creek. And we'll be looking at a plan view of the proposed project here in a little bit. Some portions of the concrete channel would remain, but some would be replaced with concrete flood walls of varying height, extending along the creek bed and at edges and along the top of the new banks created with this project above the creek basin. And we can expect significant continuous construction impacts from beginning in June through September. 2022 is the current projected date for construction to start. The existing sport courts, tennis courts, paddleball courts will not be affected, nor will the path next to the courts. So that once you get to the tennis courts, that area will essentially look like it does today. Up to 80 mature trees in Allen Park would be removed, and up to 70 additional trees could be removed from the flood control district property along the east side of the channel, fronting the backyards of the Sir Francis Drake properties. The number of the replacement trees that are proposed, although they will be rather small trees, and that could take up to 20 years to get to full and mature growth. The number would be similar or slightly more than the number being removed in the end. But again, it would take 10 to 20 years, maybe even 30 years for some of the trees to reach their full maturity and the same level of canopy. And I have some information about the propagation rates of some of the trees that were selected for the landscaping for the proposed project, and we'll take a look at that in a second. And just like alternative one and all of the alternatives for this project in Ross, the fish ladder will be removed. The creek channel from the fish ladder up to the Lagunitas Bridge will undergo some modifications, but will remain as a natural looking channel. So here is the site plan of the proposed project. So what I'm showing here is for reference, you can see the existing concrete channel between these dark lines here. So, and any of you who were in the field walks that we had prior to the workshop could see that the creek's gonna meander into where the current Frederick Allen Park pathway is. And the pathway itself is gonna be relocated back towards this area along the near the backyards of these Poplar Avenue properties. And these are the addresses of the individual properties that would see most of the impact from construction and the flood risks as well. What I've also done here is shown to scale the 15-foot no tree zone that could be enforced by the Corps of Engineers. Their section 408 permit. That's a correction to my staff report. I put a section 404, which is a core permit, but that deals mainly with dredging. So it's the core 408 permit that deals with modifications to this channel. And that would be, under that permit would be the either the requirement for removal of trees within 15 feet or granting a variance to allow planting along the tree zones. So this is a 2 to 3 foot high flood wall on top of a newly created and graded bank for this project. And so I'm showing the 15 foot on either side. Same down here is a small flood wall down here that actually gets a little bit steeper to say 3 or 4 feet at the end. And we have a flood wall back here too. And it's my understanding that the Corps does not intend to enforce this 15-foot no tree zone on the private properties in back. So I'm only showing this no tree zone within the project site. And that came from my conversation with the county, where I was asking what is the status of these flood walls. And again, this is just a 2-foot high flood wall. But will the Corps require access through the private properties? And that's a negative. In fact, there's no impacts with the construction of the proposed projects for any of these properties along Poplar and Ross Common, except for the construction impacts as construction is going on. They will be right there experiencing it, as well as the properties along Sir Francis Drake, 3 Sir Francis Drake, 11, 15, and on up to practically to Lagunitas Road. And so here is the proposed project with some of the proposed tree species. And I'm going to kind of zoom up a little bit on it. So where we have no flood walls, that's where the most of the extensive tree plantings are going to occur. We have these are white alders, are these darker, larger trees here. We've got the smaller willows that go along the creek there, and the bay laurels are along here. So we have pictures of what they look like. There's your bay laurel, there's your white alder. And the next slide, we're going to take a look at the propagation rates of these. And unfortunately, I'll have to flop back and forth if we want to follow along. But let me go back to that. So this area, these trees will not be removed for the proposed project. And that includes the Ross, we call the rose bush that's up around here, and those trees adjacent to the tennis courts, which are right here. So those will remain. A few of these trees over here near that this one open entry area, although it is private property, where people can access Frederick Allen Park through here. For the most part, these trees will remain, and some new trees will be planted there as well. So we had the town arborist review the planting plan as proposed for this proposed project, and he came up with some propagation rates, what height they reach at maturity and the spread of the canopy. And and then verified that the starting size that'll be planted are the same sizes proposed in the proposed project. So if we look at some of these trees, you can see that the growth rate in some cases is about 3 feet per year for the most part. Here's 2 feet per year. Those live oaks grow a little bit slower, but at 3 feet a year, so in 10 years, you would have a 30 feet height. So these big leaf maples, the box elder, the white alders, and the Pacific willows, these sort of trees would reach, some of them will reach maturity rather quickly, but the bigger trees will start to reach maturity in about 10 years and continue for the next, into the 20 and even 30 years to full maturity height. So 10 years is still a long time, no doubt, but that gives you an idea of the propagation rate. Year by year, we'll see it a little bit more as it goes. And then this is just one of the renderings provided by the county. And this is really just to show kind of the height of the wall. So if you look over here, middle to the right, that's the wall along the backyards of the Poplar residences. So you can see it's about a 2 foot high flood wall at the top of the bank, and the bank slopes down to the creek bottom here. And then down here opposite the tennis courts, this is a wall that's probably, it starts the same height as the existing concrete channel. And then as it goes back up the slope, it gets smaller and smaller, and you can't see it, unfortunately. But by the time it gets to the top of the slope up here, it's only about a 2-foot high proposed flood wall. And this is the overlook area here and the bike path area here. And so this is the proposed project. And I want to stop here and recall that we do have an alternative 2, which is a similar project, but it moves the bike path. I think the bike path would stay in the same location, but it would maintain the same elevation as the rear back here. And you would remove all of this access to the creek. So you'd have the natural channel, but you'd be restricting access for the public to the creek. And that would keep this as a more natural setting, and hopefully with a little bit of enforcement, we can keep kids and dogs out of there if we decided to go with something like alternative 2. And then alternative 3 we'd have the option to turn these walls into a more naturalized stone type facade, or it actually stone in some parts of the wall, the stone itself. So you can get a little bit of a more natural feeling with alternative 3 with this proposal of the floodplain park with Allen Park. So this view, I'm going to go backwards. So the next view, so we're standing here on this overlook. This next view is going to be standing here across the creek, looking back over to this overlook. So here you are standing here on the opposite side, looking back at the overlook over here. So you can see the wall over here it's shown as the existing concrete channel wall with a natural channel at the bottom. There may need to be some additional structural work that is going to hold this wall in place. They're just starting to look at the county and the county's consultants just starting to look at what sort of additional structural elements will need to be done to either put tiebacks in to hold this wall in place, or to actually build another soldier pile wall on the opposite side of this wall, or actually replace it with a soldier pile wall with a fence on top of it. But this is an entirely new wall that gradually steps down from the existing height up here at the post office parking lot. And it gradually steps down until it becomes about a 2-foot high wall through here. They're showing some stone facade there. So that gives you kind of an idea of the replacement walls, where those would be and what height and what they would look like. So now we're going to take a look at the flood risk reduction comparison again. We looked at this during the discussion of the draft EIR a little bit, and so we're going to revisit it, hopefully go through it just pretty quickly until we get to the 100-year storm, where we could see somewhat of a material difference between the proposed project flood risk reduction and alternative 1. So here, existing 10-year storm. You recall in 2017 where we had those storms that just started to go over bank near the post office and up along Sylvan Lane. Now that was a 7-year storm, 6 or 7 year storm. So the 10-year storm is just slightly larger, but it is it does have significant overbank, and we have flooding of about just under a foot flowing down through. This is Poplar Avenue. This is Redwood up here. So this becomes is actually a floodway where the overbank will pour into these areas. Here's Ross Common up here. Post office looks high and dry, but areas of Ross Common around the school would be under about a foot of water, as well as the areas along Sylvan Lane would be inundated here, as would the town hall and fire station. Very rather deep flooding here. That's that vacant parcel across from town hall, which is down pretty low. So you see a higher depth there because it's already a reduced elevation. So that's the 10-year existing. Now we compare with the proposed project. You see mainly by removal of the fish ladder, you have kept all the water in the channel and there's no more overbank. There's a little bit here along these properties along Sylvan Lane. But for the 10-year storm, you virtually are keeping everything in the channel and everything's pretty much high and dry all around. Alternative one, very similar. There seems to be a little bit of overbank flooding here along these properties along Sir Francis Drake. This is really, that's the flood control property there. And I think that's between 15 and 11 Sir Francis Drake. But I'm gonna flop back to the proposed project 10-year. So very little difference. So existing condition, a 25-year storm is going to cause quite a bit more mayhem in town. You see a lot deeper flooding here. This is along Ross Common near, Tony Tudo's is right here. You start seeing getting up to 2.6, 2.5 feet depth of flooding. And if you go by Tony Tudo's, you'll see a little marker on the side of the wall from the 2005 flood. And it is indeed about 2.5 feet above the sidewalk. So it gets pretty deep around here. Lots of flooding along the creek and the Sir Francis Drake properties, and getting up again about a foot of flooding here in the Poplar area and between Poplar and Redwood here, and Ross Common, quite a bit of flooding through the Ross Common fields there, 2.5 feet of flooding or so. That's existing condition. That's for a 25-year storm. Then we look after the project. So again, with the removal, mainly with the removal of the fish ladder, we have quite a bit of area that is going to see some real benefit here. The post office, Ross Common will be, the roadway will be clear. Some minor flooding here, looks like it down around the 0.3, 0.4 feet area down around here. Rather significant flooding still here along these properties along Sylvan Lane. Still a bit here at Town Hall, and hopefully you can follow my cursor what I'm saying here. So, and then between the proposed project and alternative one, you see just a bit more flooding here, and is getting up to Sir Francis Drake. We'll plop back to proposed project. It's still there, but it gets a little bit more flooding here. Let's take a look at down here in along Ross Common. Proposed alternative. You can kind of see there's a little bit difference, but you're down here in the 0.1, 0.2 range, an inch or two. So it's in the 25-year and 10-year, it's a negligible difference whether you go with alternative one or you go with the proposed project. Both, again, I've said it before, it's a win-win situation wherever we go. We're going to get significant flood risk reduction if we can get the county moving on some project after tonight. So we get to the 100-year storm, and it's pretty bad. So everywhere we see blue, you're here in the 2.5 foot depth. Now this is depth above the surface. That's all this means. So here in the Ross Common fields, you're getting flooded pretty good, 2.5 to getting up into this yellow area here. You're 3 feet of flooding. Same around everybody's underwater basically. So down here through Ross Common and continuing down into Kent, FEMA designated this a regulatory floodway, just like our channel. So we've got 2.5 upper 2.7, 2.8 feet of flooding above the roadbed and into these parcels along Ross Common on both sides. And so with the proposed project, so existing conditions proposed, you eliminate a lot of the blue, it's going to flop back and forth, existing proposed. We get some pretty significant flood reduction with this project. And it's, but when you compare the proposed project with alternative one, there are some differences. It's very subtle. You do kind of have to zoom in a little bit to really see the difference. What is this? So this is the proposed project. Let me go back. Doesn't. Alternative one. Oh, let's go previous. Go previous. So if you look at the proposed project compared to the alternative one, there is some differences down here in the along the poplar and redwood properties here. There is some difference here along the Sir Francis Drake properties, here along Sylvan and along where Town Hall is. So because this is a little bit hard to visualize, I had the county take this data and provide me with a plot of the difference between alternative one and the proposed project. And that's what this slide shows. And again, this can get confusing. In fact, in the staff report, I do have an error that needs that should be corrected, and it's corrected here on this exhibit. Page 4 of the staff report under B, impacts to tributary drainage into Corte Madera Creek. At the end of that first paragraph, it says alternative one would improve tributary drainage upstream of 15 Sir Francis Drake inclusive, but exacerbate tributary drainage downstream of 11 Sir Francis Drake. Well, it's actually the opposite. It's alternative one would exacerbate tributary drainage upstream of 15 Sir Francis Drake, but improve tributary drainage downstream of 11 Sir Francis Drake. So let's take a look at what actually that means. So this again is the difference, the depth difference between if you did alternative one or you did the proposed project. So if you did alternative one, the dark blue areas, you would see between 0.5 and 1 foot higher depth in these areas if you went with alternative one. And when I went back and analyzed these, I didn't see anywhere where it actually got to a 1 foot difference along these, but it looks like it's about a 0.6, 0.7 at the most. So when we look at this, this is between 0.2 and 0.5, and this is probably 0.5 to 0.7 or so, which can be considered significant or worth considering. And I've got another slide coming up where I actually can have a real case analysis of one of the properties. So, but you can see here, these properties between 53 and 35 up to about 29 poplar would see between 0.5 and I'm saying 0.75, 0.8 more inundation if we decided to go with alternative one. Down here a little less, 0.2 to 0.5 for all these properties, but still considerable. So what's happening here? Well, let's take a look first up here. So fish ladder is about right here. So we take out the fish ladder and we build this floodplain park. You do see a lot, 23 Sir Francis Drake, a little bit in 21 and 25, would see additional flooding, a flood depth elevation, or we'll just call it flood risk, going with alternative one as opposed to the proposed project. And a little bit higher in the channel along these properties. And quite a bit higher after where the fish ladder was, down to about between 15 and 11 Sir Francis Drake, you're going to see higher water in the channel. And I'll get to what that means. It basically means any tributary drainage coming in here, I've got a slide coming up, is going to, would if you didn't do anything, if you didn't put in flap gates or relocate the outfall to a lower elevation, you would see that additional backwater translate into backwater going up Kittle Creek through Magic. It probably wouldn't impact that much, but you wouldn't go past probably this area in behind Sir Francis Drake. It's only 0.2 or 0.3 inches, but that will impact the immediate area behind it. And then we have another main storm drain, and I'm going to show that later, that comes in right around here too, that you would see that backwater effect exacerbate the flooding in the tributary areas. Once you get past this dark blue, you're kind of in the neutral area here. There's really no difference between alternative one and the proposed project as far as changing the depth of the water in the channel. But once you get past 11 Sir Francis Drake, you start seeing lower water surfaces elevations in the channel if you went with alternative one. But we do have a couple of fairly good sized culverts, a box culvert and some other drainage from Sir Francis Drake and from Poplar that would go in here that would benefit from selecting alternative one, where you would see a lower water surface in the channel compared to the project. And so I hope that makes sense, and we can always come back if you have any questions. And so here's, just to give you some reference, tennis courts are here, Kentfield Hospital here, and here's Ross School, Ross Common up here. So on to the next slide. So here's our case study. I took 47 Poplar Avenue, did a major remodel in 2017. And so that required a surveyor to go out and survey the finished floor. And you can see down here what happens when they trigger our floodplain ordinance compliance. Requires them to go out and survey the property before construction, actually during construction. If they're going to be pouring a new foundation, we have them verify that the forms are in the right place before they pour concrete. And then post-construction, we go out again, or we send the applicant sends their own surveyor out again to survey the property. So this is what kind of information you would get. To the top of the bottom floor in California, where we don't have basements usually, that's the dirt in your crawl space. When you look under your house, that's considered bottom floor for these elevation certificates. So they're around 17.6. Top of the next higher floor, 9 times out of 10, that is your finished floor of your living room as you enter your front door. So you can see this house is, a good 4 feet above the ground. So this house was raised either with this project, I don't recall, or prior. It's sitting up pretty good. Bottom of lowest horizontal structural member, only in the V zones. That's only out where you have wave run up out at Stinson Beach and those areas. No attached garage here, but they would, if there was an attached garage, they'd shoot the slab. And they take the lowest elevation of the machinery, the HVAC and the electrical equipment. That has to be surveyed as well. And in this case, they must have mounted it at the same elevation as the finished floor, the lowest elevation of their HVAC and electrical components. Then they look for the lowest adjacent grade next to the building, wherever that might be. 17.4 is what they shot, pretty close to the grade under the house. Their highest adjacent grade, 17.7. The difference of a dirt clod, really, this is a pretty flat lot. Then they also will shoot the lowest adjacent grade at lowest elevation of the deck or stairs, including any structural support. So it's all around that area. So what I gleaned from this when I went back to these maps for 100-year, the base flood elevation always refers to 100-year. And I did zoom in on, wrong one, proposed 100-year. So 47 Poplar, excuse me for flipping through here. 47 Poplar is right here behind the northerly tennis courts. It's right in this area. So I was able to see for if you did the proposed project, you can kind of look at it, and everybody's faces are in the way there. So you can see the light green area, which matches kind of, you're down in this area. So you figure about 0.2, 0.3 feet of depth with the proposed project. And so that's where I kind of did this calculation here. So you look at the existing 100-year base flood elevation. Again, I pulled that off the existing 100-year exhibit a few slides up. And it looked like I calculated about a 1.5 foot depth. And from the elevation certificate down here, 17.5 is roughly the dirt grade. That's height above sea level, basically, 17.5 feet above mean sea level for all intents and purposes. And then 1 plus 1 foot of flooding, you'd get to be about elevation 19 for the 100-year storm currently. So the finished floor is high and dry above 19 feet. They're way up there at 21.5. Your crawl space is flooded at a 100-year storm. It's under what, 1.4 feet of water. And same all around the house, basically. Your electrical equipment is dry, but you do have about 1.5 feet of flooding around your house. So I did the same analysis for the proposed project, found about it to be about a 0.3 foot depth. So you're at about a 17.8 with the proposed project. So you've, between where it is currently, we see a reduction of about 1.2 feet, which is rather significant. But when you look at the reality of it, 17.8, well, you've got 4/10 of flooding next to your building at the lowest spot, and you've got about 1/10, about an inch or so at the highest point. But the water is still lapping against your house, and 17.6, it is. If you have vents, your water is getting into your crawl space there. And then if you look at alternative 1, you have the 17.5 elevation next to the house. And I picked off a 0.7, and let me go back just for giggles. So alternative 1 for this particular parcel, right in here, you see kind of the blue area here where it transitions to a light blue and then a dark green. So you're kind of down here and you're in this area. You're at about a 0.7, 0.8 area here, as compared to where we were with the proposed project 0.3. So again, this is really the best I can do to bring this into what a real life example would be. So alternative 1, you're at 17.5 plus about a 0.7 depth. So now you're at 18.2. You're still the finished floor. All your important things are still high and dry. Your machinery, 21.5, you're still good, but your crawl space is under a bit more water. Your backyard and front yard is under, an additional half foot of depth. And these homes along Poplar are in the flood zone, which means, or the regulatory floodway, which means you have high velocity water pouring down here. This is actually it's actually a flowing river. The water has split flow between the channel and Roscommon and Kent to have rather high velocities coming in. So you could consider this difference of 0.4 in fast rushing water could be something to consider. So I'd be remiss if I didn't show this type of information to you tonight as you make your decision. I think it's important to kind of look at, this is fairly typical of the houses along Poplar. A lot of them have raised their houses above the 100-year base flood elevation. For the most part, they're in pretty good shape regardless of which alternative we run with. But they will see, as if you step outside, they will see a bit more water up against their house. And that's really kind of, those kind of statements is all we can really say at this point. So hopefully that was helpful. And then this, you've seen this before, but what I added here is where the tributary drainage comes into. This is the offsite drainage points that hit the channel. I did kind of already go over this, but just really quick. These green arrows were fairly significant culverts empty into the channel. This basically drains Kittle Creek right here, all the way up Canyon. Rather pretty good watershed comes shooting through here, where if you look at alternative one, you've got a bit higher of now a higher water surface in the channel compared to the proposed project. And on the other side, this is another major a culvert that runs all the way down Ross Common. This is a culvert we put in a few years ago, I think when we did the bridge, and it picks up all the drainage down Lagunitas all the way to Shady. It's a pretty good sized culvert too. So something would have to happen here, whether, and again, let me say that with the proposed project, I don't want to pick on alternative one, because the proposed project also increases the water surface elevation in here and will require mitigation for the offsite drainage as well, all the way along here. So this map being the difference map, I probably should have just shown what a proposed project looks like. And so it would be red all, it would be red all along here. So these contributory culverts are impacted regardless of which alternative or proposed project we run with. But this demonstrates if the difference between alternative one and the proposed project up here. These major culverts draining Kittle Creek runs through Magic, and this major drainage area down Lagunitas will see a little bit more, will require a little bit more mitigation because they drain into this area where the water surface would be increased compared to the proposed project. Down here, these see a little bit of relief. If we run with alternative one, we see lower water surface elevation through here. So it's a give and take, win-win. And it's going to be up to you, Mayor and Council, to decide which project we're going to run with. So my last slide here, just kind of overview of the questionnaire results summary. I've got a number of responses, 363. That's a pretty good number, I would say, a good sample. It turns out a fair number of those were, people would, they'd get the questionnaire and they would forward it to their friends and they'd forward it to other people, which is perfectly fine. We want to get as much folks as possible, but it gets a little bit hard to track. We can't, it's a very unscientific questionnaire. We all knew that going in. It's hard to tell, if anyone did multiple submittals on the questionnaire or, who they actually sent it to. We don't know that, but all in all, you should consider this a pretty good sample of the sentiment of the public, I would say. So the folks who prefer option A, which is the proposed project, 29% of the folks wanted to go with the proposed project, whereas 62% of the respondents want to stay with alternative one, where there's no impact to Frederick Allen Park. And then we had 2.5% that didn't have a preference, and a fair percent, 7%, didn't have enough information to have a preference. Most of the residents were from Ross. We had a small 8% from Kentfield, Green Bay, Larkspur. I selected that demographic because they're downstream of us, and then the upstream residents in San Anselmo and Fairfax, only about 4%. And others that didn't want to say is about 3%. And this is kind of interesting. We only had one respondent under the age of 20. Most of the respondents were in the age group 51 to 65, and even if you want to go 66 or older. And a fairly good amount right in the middle there, 36 to 50. So why would those who selected option A, the proposed project, most of them wanted it because of the ability to access the naturalized channel for recreation. Turned out to be 23. Well, no, that's not true, Richard. So if you look down here, option A creates slightly better flood risk reduction than option B. That's 29%. And then next comes the improved fish passage and wildlife. Then next comes the naturalized channel. And then you look at the, total 19% think that the reconfigured park will be an improved visual resource. And then at the bottom, the ability to access the channel for learning opportunities came to about 8%. And then why would you select option B over the alternative one, the no impact Frederick Allen Park? And by and large, the 70.7% it is because of the important natural resources of the existing trees, and that it could take a long time for the new trees to grow. It's going to be denuded once they cut down the trees for the proposed project. They felt that Frederick Allen Park is an important resource to the town of Ross. And the reasons these don't all add up to 100, or they add up to more than 100, is of course because you could make two choices, your top two choices. So that causes the math to change up a little bit. So next in line was the flood benefits are substantially similar to option A. That was about 50% of the respondents selected that one. And then we have added construction impacts. They don't want to have the impacts, those 3 months of construction activities at 30%. 25%, the added cost, the flood control district doesn't justify it. And then finally, they're afraid that only 5% were afraid that it'll have a negative impact on their home. So, and then real quick here, the next steps. So the publication of the final EIR sometime probably in July, it could be in late June. Then we go into permitting, and this is a very aggressive schedule. Summer of 2021, which is just around the corner, they would submit for design review, and we'd start reviewing the encroachment agreement and any maintenance agreements and those sort of things. By fall of 2021, the plan review would theoretically be completed, and we'd be issuing building permits and grading permits. And construction would start in April 2022 with Frederick Allen Park between June and October, and construction complete in Ross in October 2022. So that's pretty aggressive, but I think it's still doable. And that concludes my presentation. Here we are back at alternative one. That's what it's going to look like. Frederick Allen Park, our beautiful public resource here in town. So that concludes my presentation, and we are send it back to you, Mayor and Council, for discussion.
Thank you very much, Rich, for that very helpful and thorough presentation. Let's start with questions from council members to Rich, Department of Public Works. Do council members, let's see, can I see everybody? Yes. Do any council members have questions for Rich? Councilmember McMillan.
Thank you. Thank you, Rich. That was really thorough. Just a quick question on the drainage changes that need to happen because of either the proposed project or alternative one.
Mm-hmm.
Who pays for that?
Well, that's definitely part of the Marin County Flood Control District construction budget to either construct the flap gates that close when the flood wave goes through, and or relocating that storm drain further downstream, so to lessen the backwater. That's the county flood zone line.
Okay, thank you.
Other question?
I have one
Oh,
other
go ahead.
question. I assume you were able to give us that breakdown on 47 Poplar because they had done a recent remodel. Is there any way to look at any of the other properties that are affected to determine which properties are just, the raw land is affected versus the actual structure or the HVAC, the basement?
There's a couple more. See, the regulatory floodway was created in 2014, and they changed the elevation certificate. So there's only been like 3 or 4 properties between or along Ross Common this is the only one I found that was really in the impact area. There are a couple more where I could get an idea of what the existing ground is. They're very flat lots. I don't have a record of who's raised and who hasn't raised or what their finished floor is. But I could pick out one or two more, but they weren't in this, the zone of the difference between alternative one and the proposed project. But I can definitely analyze that for either one of those conditions a little bit. But by and large, it looks like most of the finished floor elevations wouldn't be impacted, but I don't have the precise number and lists
Okay,
of that.
thanks.
Are there questions from other council members? So Rich, I have a couple of questions. One is something that's just come up, which is, it takes years and lots of water to get newly planted trees established. And all of a sudden there's a drought. With the drought, I mean, would we have to hold off on landscaping if we go with the proposed project? I'm not quite sure it's ethical and, possible to use a lot of water to establish a whole landscaping project. What kind of effect do you think the drought would have on this project?
Well, the irrigation in Frederick Allen Park is from a well that we have back there. We're not on MMWD water, so we are, though, dependent on the level of the groundwater of the aquifer. It seems to be doing quite well right now. We're able to water the Ross Common, which is also on 3 wells, and I checked with Anthony, our Public Works maintenance head, and he talked to our consultant, our contractor who does the landscaping, and they see no problems yet with the irrigation going on in Frederick Allen Park. Everything's getting watered from the well pretty well. So if this is a continuous drought that goes on for a number of years, we'll start seeing the groundwater diminish. And we might start seeing issues with watering, but right now we're in pretty good shape. And we're off the MMWD grid.
Do you think, would the town get, bad press if we're, draining the wells to water our new trees? Or do you think that won't be a problem? I would hate for people to say, Ross is using up more than its share of water just because it has a well. That'd be embarrassing.
Yeah, hard to say. One interesting aspect is that every month I meet with the other public works directors in Marin County. And when we're talking about the drought, I brought up whether how many of the other agencies have wells, municipal wells to landscape their parks. And I was really surprised that not very many at all. Some of them have 1 or 2 wells that they haven't worked for a while. I have a lot of experience in groundwater from Monterey, and I offered my expertise to the different agencies about getting on municipal wells. So I think we could be somewhat immune from that sort of scrutiny if we say, well, we've had these wells in place for a long time. It's groundwater. Other residents in Ross have irrigation wells as well that they'll be watering their property as long as they've got water in their wells too. So
Okay.
really hard to say. It's a very good point, and it is something to consider, the public, how the public perceives us watering this brand new park. So
Then I have a question about cost benefit. We had asked about what the Allen Park element would cost and haven't been given numbers from the flood control district. From 3 years ago, it looked like that element was going to cost around or up to $10 million, and the flood and the fish ladder was around $1 or $2 million. Those were just estimates, but that's kind of all we have to go on.
Mhm.
Is it a good enough cost benefit ratio to spend close to $10 million when there's not very much difference with the Allen Park element?
So the $10 million is really the flood control's budget for the entire Corte Madera Creek Phase 1 project. As you recall, that includes a new flood wall at Granton Park down in Kentfield, and all of that work down at College of Marin where they're naturalizing their channel and doing work as well. So when you look at those elements, which are, they have some significant costs involved there, and they're also doing the pump station and the access into the channel. There's several different elements that this $10 million is going to. So roughly, if you look at, 1/3 of that cost goes to what the work's done in Ross, then you're only looking at around, 3.3 million. I think 2 million just to remove the fish ladders, probably everyone thinks that's a bit too high, and that's probably true. But I think that 2 million also includes the development of the creek channel up to Lagunitas as well. So you can kind of get an idea that it's probably in the 2 to 3 million range to do Frederick Allen Park, and I doubt it's 2 million to do the fish ladder and the channel. So yeah, you're probably looking at about 3 million. And whether there's a cost benefit or not, that's really a subjective type question. Each person's going to feel differently.
Okay. And then one other question. How are projects like these funded? So would the entire amount be put in, say, an escrow account at the beginning of the project so that we know the money is there and they'll go all the way through the landscaping? Or is it kind of a pay-as-you-go sort of arrangement? How does it work?
So it's my understanding that the Flood Zone 9 has this $10 million budget, and it's funded, it's programmed, it's there, but the process is going to look something like this, where once they know after tonight where they're going to go, they start developing the design, and it could very well be that as they proceed through the construction costs, that maybe one or two elements needs to go or needs to be revised because it's going over budget, or alternatively, they see that they have some extra money and they can add some things here and there. So they have $10 million to develop this, plus or minus. So they're, if you will, they're fitting a project into a budget, and things may fall out or things may be added. You can't really tell it at this point. But it's all Flood Zone 9 money, and hopefully the DWR grant is available.
Well, the last part, of course, is the landscaping. So I would hope that the money doesn't run out before that goes in, because wouldn't the town then be on the hook for buying its own trees and landscaping it?
Yeah, hard to say. I would be surprised if, they have, the work could be bonded as well. You have a performance bond, you have a materials bond. They would have to bond the project. If they run out of money, then they would pull on this insurance policy to finish it up. That's the common way to do any sort of construction project.
Great, thank you. So sorry, Councilmember Cool, I didn't see your hand up. Go ahead. You're muted, Beach.
I got it.
Okay.
Rich, my understanding is that the intention is that this project, whichever we select, doesn't cost Ross any money other than perhaps we have some staff costs that we have to absorb. But basically, it's a project that is going to be paid for by the county flood control and by a grant from the state water board. Is that right?
Essentially, that's correct.
Thank you.
Are there other questions from council members? Yes,
A
Councilmember
question.
Percher.
Yeah, a question for Rich. In terms of the modeling that we do have so far from the flood district and their consultants, how reliable is that? Is there a margin of error? Could it turn out to be worse than what they are predicting?
The short answer is yes. There is a margin of error, and yes, it could turn out to be worse than they are predicting. The way you develop these models is there's, like, I think I'd mentioned it before, there's a wide range of 100-year storms that get hit. It could be a a low intensity storm that runs for a week, or it could be a very high intensity storm that runs for 4 hours. And it's still classified as that type of storm that happens. There's a 1% chance each year. And then you can get a very, very high intensity rainfall over a very short time, 1 hour, 2 hour, where you would have some very severe flooding for 6 hours, 4 hours, whatever. That shows much more than what the model shows. So what the model has done is statistically determine that type of storm that would hit Northern California, and then they've got these types of storms documented pretty well. The duration and type of storms that hit this part of California, that 85 percentile, they call it, the kind of the center of the bell curve, is this intensity for this duration is the most likely storm that's going to hit. So yeah, you can get either end of the bell curve, where you got a 100-year storm, but it never really did much damage because it just rained like mad for 10 days. Or hey, we got hit with 6 inches per hour for 2 hours, and it went over bank and flooded things right away. So hard to predict, but the modeling just kind of takes the best chance of this type of storm hitting. So I'm not sure that answered your question. It's a difficult question to answer, but that's how these models are developed.
It just, yeah, excuse me. My concern is that the modeling, and I'm sure it's sophisticated and it's been well done, but it's a prediction about what will happen in the future.
Mm-hmm.
And like any prediction, it can be off, I assume, even if they did everything absolutely right according to present science and engineering standards. This is a complex system, so they're making some predictions if we remove the concrete channel as to what would happen, but we won't really know that for sure until it happens. Whereas with the concrete channel, we do have some experience with it, 50 years worth. So we do know how it performs. And I'm just wondering, I mean, I would hate to see us approve the proposed project, thinking there would be a modest benefit, only to find out it's actually worse. So I'm just wondering what the chances are that might happen. I mean, I read about this, they design airplanes and they'll look great on paper, and then they fly the airplane and there's a problem and the airplane is grounded while they redesign it. I mean, is there that risk here, or am I sort of comparing apples and oranges?
I think everything you said is a fair statement, and irrefutable if you consider how these models are developed. Yes, something could go wrong. Yes, we could have a large storm. I don't think. I mean, the one thing I would look at very carefully and watch during construction is the construction of this natural bank behind the homes of Sir Francis Drake. That's a whole new constructed creek bank. It's basically a levee. Now the county has a lot of experience building levees. They're doing a huge levee project in Santa Venetia. They're doing a levee project on Novato Creek. They've been doing these for a while. The engineering department, they know what they're doing as far as levees, and this would be considered a levee that needs to be designed and certified by FEMA under the regulatory design standards of the State Division of Dams. So, but like you said, something can always go wrong, and what you're saying should be taken into consideration. We have a concrete channel. It is old. It's the concrete itself they found to be in pretty good shape, but the segments of concrete, there's plenty of cracks in it as well. So the concrete channel I've seen upwelling of groundwater coming through the bottom of the channel. That's never a good sign. Maybe maybe that's going to fail as well, or maybe it'll last another 50 years. That's the thing about engineering, is where it's all formulas and past based on past experience and anecdotal experience with these type of projects. So good questions, very hard to answer, Bill.
Thank you.
Are there other questions from council members? Then let's open it up to questions or comments. Sorry, not questions. Let's open it up to comments from members of the public. Please introduce yourself, and if you tell us.
I'll bring in the first one, Mayor.
Wait, let me just say, tell us where you live, and also your comments are limited to 3 minutes. Linda, who is going to be timing that? Will there be a tile on the screen that has a
Yes,
countdown?
yes. Rich is going to time it. I'm going to bring in the first one is John Crane. Go ahead, John. You can unmute yourself.
Thank you. My apologies. Rich, I want to make sure I heard you right. Did you say we're kind of immune from drought?
Well, when you're on wells and you're on the groundwater, you're not immune from drought, but you have a couple of years ahead of relying on the Marin Municipal Water District supplies.
Okay, because one of the things, there's no way you would know this about me, but I've been working on a water film since 2015, and it specifically deals with drought, the lack of well water, groundwater, and aquifers. It is a huge problem that is really complicating how we get out of this. But I just wanted to make sure I heard you properly, because I found that comment disturbing. Personally, I think we're entering a really scary period. There's 100% of the Californians right now is in emergency drought. We all know about wildfires. It's a huge concern. But my main point I wanted to say is that if we were looking at this project and playing with our own money, there's no way the proposed project would still be on the table. It just simply is not worth the flood benefit for what we're going to expend and have to suffer through. And I think drought is a consideration for reestablishing a park that's going to plant 80 to 150 trees. That's a lot of water. And I heard what you said on the well water, so I understand that. But groundwater, aquifers, and all that are now being severely threatened. And I've been working with Stanford University and Cal Berkeley on this project. I could throw a gazillion experts your way if you would like to hear from them. So thank you. I appreciate what you're doing tonight.
Thank you.
Okay, the next person I'm bringing in is Brad O'Connell.
Thank you. Thank you. Let me engage my video here. Thank you, Mayor Robbins, members of the council. You have received a letter from us earlier this week and several emails. I'm going to try not to repeat those and try to stick to some broader points, including what you might call some adjudicative points, which is how I think the members of the council should go about deciding this. There is public clamor for flood control. There is clamor and consensus that we need to replace the fish ladder, because everyone agrees the fish ladder has been the main culprit in 2005 and in the lesser and near floods. There's consensus on that. Removal of the fish ladder is a win-win. The proposed project is not. Whatever one thinks about the pros and cons, I think everyone would agree the proposed project is the more radical, the more drastic project. No one, while there may be disagreements on to what extent the proposed project may get slightly more flood abatement than removal of the fish ladder, there are no real critiques of any noteworthy harms flowing just from removal of the fish ladder. And as we've laid out in our letter, as other commentators have laid out, there are serious adverse impacts to be weighed if one is considering the proposed project. Now, I suggest that when you have one project that has consensus and the other which has a lot of unknowns and has at least some concrete adverse impacts, the burden should be on the county and the proponents of the proposed project to remove those uncertainties. But I think today we've got even more uncertainties before. We've got a lot of new analysis today that there's not going to be time for us to vet and analyze before this council takes its vote. I submit that, to come back to our letter, the councils should consider that the putative benefits of the proposed project, a fraction of a foot, even by today's presentation, are far outweighed by the very concrete harms represented by habitat loss, aesthetic loss, and privacy loss, all flowing
I'm sorry,
from
your
this
your time
removal.
is up, Brad. Can you wrap it up, please?
Yes, I will. Thank you. We strongly urge the council to support removal of the fish ladder and to reject the proposed project. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, I'm bringing in Kristen Swan. Go ahead, Kristen.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Hi. So I am one of the Sir Francis Drake property owners, and I just wanted to say that we are in support and in favor of alternative one. It's overall the most financially responsible decision, whether it's, you know, not actual town money, but county money. It is the most financially responsible decision for basically a similar flood risk reduction benefit. And I think overall it'll have the least impact on your town land and liability in the long run. I also actually have Hugh Cadden here with me as well. We're on the same Zoom, so if he can say something as well.
Hi. This is really an easy decision, in my opinion. The alternative one basically provides the flood control that we're looking for. It avoids the impacts. It's fiscally responsible, and it's concurrent with what we're getting back, the feedback that we got from the survey. The cost to Ross on this project is not zero, it's not even. The cost to Ross is staggering. It's the value of the value of Frederick Allen Park, less the easement that you're either going to give or sell to the district, which is a property right. It's millions of dollars, and it's a direct expense. And that's just the starting point, because from that flows significant liabilities for the town. The town is no longer just a passive approving entity, it's a participant in the flood control project. So the liabilities are very, very significant. And as for the cost, the county doesn't have a budget, but they do have a grant budget, which they provided some information to me. And the total cost on that, which it's represented as $14,060,754. And if it costs more than $2 million to take out the fish ladder and to put in the fish boxes, I'd be pretty well shocked. So when you look at the fiscal responsibility, the ultimate result of flood risk reduction, fish passage enhancement, it's all pretty much there. Alternative one is the choice, and I hope that you'll all see it that way. And it's a preference. If the county wants to go forward, they can go forward. They could use their eminent domain power. I don't think they'd be foolish enough to do that, but you don't know. The fact of the matter is the best preference for Ross is alternative one. And I want to thank all of you for your leadership on this.
Thank you very much.
I don't see any more raised hands. If anyone wants to speak, now's the time. Okay, now they go.
Yeah, I see some.
All right, bringing in Beth, I believe. Beth Foster, go ahead.
Oh, hi, this is Beth Foster. I live at 19 Sir Francis Drake, and just wanted to know. So the fish ladder is at the upstream end of our property. So we will be experiencing the removal of the fish ladder and the new retaining walls that are proposed to be constructed, regardless of whether the town goes with alternative one or the proposed project. So in that sense, I think I would say we're probably agnostic. But I did just want to express a little bit of concern from the new information I saw tonight in the analysis on the flooding, the potential exacerbated flood risk in the channel behind our property with alternative one. So just wanted to raise a little bit of a concern about that, and particularly one of the green arrows that crosses Sir Francis Drake that crosses under our property. So only want to point out, I appreciate the additional analysis and just hope that the town would assist in making sure that any of that mitigation that is necessary really truly is undertaken. But appreciate your work tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I'm bringing in John Child. Go ahead, John.
Thank you. I appreciate everyone's time, and I thought today was super helpful. Rich, thank you. I know we've had multiple conversations. For everyone on the council, we've sent a letter or an email in as well. My name's John Child. I live at 29 Poplar. So it's the little yellow house on Poplar. It used to be, I guess, the conductor's house. So it's been here forever. I'm one of the property owners that has the most to gain by reducing my flood exposure. And also, like, I'm most affected by the proposed plan. And I'll tell you, as a resident, if any of you lived in this area, you would look at the two and it'd be pretty clear cut that if given the choice, alternative one is what we would all choose, because it reduces basically at the same level as it was indicated in the presentation. And yet we don't go through this massive kind of unknown construction project that, again, the 6 month of them redoing it seems aggressive, but then a 20-year aftermath of dealing with noise pollution and the tree growth to get where we need to be. It just seems like a very ambitious and difficult task for folks that live on that portion of town, at the same time having that sort of flood mitigation at the same level. So again, I think everyone's voiced their opinion. I appreciate the time. And just as the town council, just understand that there's some in town that are going to be far more affected, and to take that into account on your decision. And I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I'm bringing in, I think it's Carol Page.
Yes, it's Carol Page, San Antonio.
All right.
Good evening, everybody. I'd like to begin by setting a little context. 1982 was a larger flood event than 2005, which people may remember more easily. It was the 1982 flood that unleashed years of investigation into the function of the Corps' concrete channel and the Corps constructed 1971 fish ladder. In these intervening years, the Hydrologic Engineering Center's River Analysis System, that's HEC-RAS software, has improved and become standard in planning water management. What the technology has not achieved is 100% reliability. We still depend on best guess assumptions and design concepts to predict how projects will function. Since the 1980s, county engineers and hired consultants, the Ross Historical Society engineers, residents concerned for Ross consultants, and all but one of Ross's engineers have been unanimous in stating that the upper concrete channel flows at supercritical speed, while the downstream channel flows subcritical. I do have archives to verify that. Supercritical speed works to Ross's advantage by efficiently transporting sediment at a lower water surface elevation and with less hydraulic instability. That is extremely important to the town. And alternative one is the only option proposed that preserves these advantages. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Chris Martin, go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Well, I'm going to give different comments. Tonight, you're making a very important decision. With the exception of the Lagunitas Bridge, this is the first flood protection project proposed for Ross in 20 years. The proposed plan provides better flood protection than Alternative 1. The proposed plan delivers more environmental and recreational benefits than Alternative 1. The proposed project will remove much of the repugnant concrete channel and cyclone fencing that is the ugly centerpiece of Frederick Allen Park. And it provides a riparian zone for people, fish, and wildlife to benefit from. Further, the offer presented to the town council by the Ross Middle School students and faculty to study the creek environment and to strive to improve the health of the watershed provided the proposed project and creek access are implemented is extraordinary. Let's try to make it a reality. We've also had a long history of significant floods. The 2006 flood caused over $100 million of damage to homes, businesses, and schools in Ross Valley and paralyzed many of the emergency service facilities. It's inevitable we'll continue to have significant flood events in the future with climate change and sea level rise that may be more destructive. That channel, and it's been documented, is pitted and only can provide about 50% of the stormwater that it was designed to do. And during flood events, every inch matters. And tonight you heard that the proposed plan actually does handle stormwater better. And I urge you to adopt it. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I'm bringing in, I don't know this name, PB Kahuna. Go ahead.
I knew it. There we go. Can you hear me?
Yes, what is your name?
Peter Barry,
Okay, thank you.
not Peter Breckus. So I have three things to say. One is with respect to the flood business, this is a painful thing that every council seems to endure. But I think the main fact that we have to keep in mind is that we're probably entering a drought. So you shouldn't feel like it's necessary to make a rush decision. I think in terms of flood control, my feeling is that we should not mess with Frederick Allen Park and that we should get rid of the fish ladder. I think everybody agrees on that. One of the earlier speakers said everybody agrees, and I think that's the obvious thing to do straight away. Leaving that issue aside, I'd like to say that I don't think our safety from wildfires will be improved by building a new building for administration. We should take some of that money that you want to spend and put the power lines underground. Belvedere did it, so we can probably do it. Finally, I want to say that I hope that you have all read the news that even the CDC has now decided it's okay to have meetings if everybody's vaccinated. And so I look forward to seeing you all in person and hearing the wonderfully in-depth discussions of these vital issues. Thank you.
Thank you.
Back to mute.
Are there any more speakers? Now's the time to raise your hand. I think we're done, Mayor.
So thank you. Now the council will discuss whether the proposed project or alternative one is better for Ross. Why don't we have a first round of comments, and then we can respond to each other's comments and continue the rounds until we have some consensus about where we would like to go with this. I might as well go first since everyone knows my comments from previous meetings. I think alternative one is the project that's in the town's best interests. It's cost effective, it provides significant flood control, it doesn't devastate Allen Park, it doesn't do the maximum possible, but the problem with that is that the damage to Allen Park from the proposed project is far greater than the damage that might occur in a handful of properties every 100 years. And we don't even know if the damage is limited to the yard instead of the house. One of the reasons the proposed project isn't in the town's best interests is that Allen Park will never recover from the project, despite the pretty but very misleading pictures. I don't think this will be a riparian paradise. Flood walls will replace the concrete channel in over 80% of the park. The tree canopy will likely never be as dense because of the restrictions on where trees can be planted. The creek banks won't be natural. We've told that there needs to be some sort of mat or rock framework for erosion control. The bike path will flood during heavy rains and will have to be closed. And creek access might be regulated at least by a sign because of the bacteria and pesticide residue. And some other reasons why the proposed project isn't in the town's best interests. The town will have increased maintenance and policing costs, as well as increased liability. The cost could be many millions of dollars more than the cost of alternative one. And the slight increase in flood protection in the proposed project may only mean that slightly fewer backyards have water. The homes might already be protected with the fish ladder removal in alternative one. And worst case with the proposed project, if the hydraulic modeling is off, there might not be any benefit with the Allen Park project and flooding could possibly worsen. So to me, the permanent damage to Allen Park with the proposed project, that would be fine if there was a meaningful additional flood benefit, but there just isn't. And far greater damage will be done to the park than damage from any floods that we're trying to prevent. I don't think we should be spending the 10 million or whatever it costs on this project because of the minimal flood benefit that it produces. And it still leaves us with a creek that is very much a man-made channel. It's not a natural creek. And then we should listen to our Allen Park neighbors who have asked that we choose alternative one. So I would say alternative one provides excellent flood control, and it's such a simple project that's likely that it'll actually get done. The proposed project is so extensive and so complicated, it could get held up for years, even decades, and then we'd be left with nothing. So I think alternative one is the project that's in the town's best interests. Those are my initial comments. Who would like, Julie, do you want to go next? I don't see any raised hands.
Yeah, I can go next. You know, I just want to thank Rich and the staff and the flood control and Panorama and everyone. I know everyone's worked really hard to get us where we are. My first meeting on the town council was discussing that Army Corps, you know, tunnels going down Sir Francis Drake. So, and that was like almost 4 years ago. So we haven't really gotten very far. But we have given all of this a lot of thought over the last, you know, 3 or 4 years. I agree with what Elizabeth Robbins has said. I think the flood benefits with the proposed project are substantially similar to alternative one. I think the costs for the proposed project are going to be very large compared to alternative one. In the draft EIR, they even said that they wanted to be fiscally responsible. So I think alternative one meets that goal better than the proposed project. And I keep hearing this phrase that the proposed project is more naturalized, and it turns out that, you know, the creek never really ran through Frederick Allen Park. The railroad used to run through Frederick Allen Park. So by making, you know, a ditch through Frederick Allen Park, it's not really making it more naturalized. And I looked through the Ross general plan, and one of the things that is in the general plan is to maximize the amount of land retained in its natural state. So I think, you know, by lowering Frederick Allen Park by 8 feet to create a floodplain park kind of violates the Ross general plan. And I'm not sure, you know, people have said, oh, we need to open it up for recreational benefits, but I don't think the water in the creek is going to be very clean. The draft EIR says that there will be a variety of water quality problems related to non-point source pollution from urban runoff, et cetera, et cetera. So it's not like we're going to have kids cruising around in, you know, pristine water in the bottom of this man-made, person-made ditch. And then, you know, it's going to remove a ton of trees, 140 well-established trees. The general plan also says that we should protect and expand the tree canopy of Ross to enhance the beauty of the natural landscape. Recognize that the tree canopy is critical to provide shade, reduce ambient temperatures, improve the uptake of carbon dioxide, et cetera. And I'm concerned about the lack of trees being able to be planted 15 feet on either side of the new flood walls. And I think Rich's diagram was helpful to show, you know, some pretty broad swaths of areas where there could be no trees. And we should not, I think it's highly unlikely that we would be the first group to get a 408 permit variance. I don't think the Army Corps has ever granted one of those variances. So, and the draft EIR says that the lack of trees will make the proposed concrete retaining walls surrounding buildings and earthen channel more exposed, which would result in a substantial change in visual quality due to increased exposure of concrete structures within the park setting. And I'm not sure, you know, I hear about the wells. That's great that we have wells, but, you know, I don't know how long the aquifer is going to be able to provide water, hopefully for a really long time. I know there's areas in the Central Valley that are sinking because they pumped the heck out of the aquifers. So that's a concern. I also don't think that the proposed project meets our town's newest goal, which is to promote environmental stewardship. I think removal of trees and vegetation will create heat islands. Removing perfectly good vegetation and trees and installing replacements is wasteful. It's lowering the park by 8 feet will require massive amounts of soil removal. It's estimated at 8,900 cubic yards of soil removal, more than 2,000 truckloads of dirt, estimated at more than 93 one-way truck trips per day when the construction's going on. You know, if any of us is still on the council when that's happening, man, I'm leaving town for that 7-month period, right? I mean, people are going to be having a fit. You know, finally, the community questionnaire and almost every letter sent to the council support proceeding with alternative 1. There's, besides Chris Martin's statements and the one letter received from David Peterson, we haven't really received a groundswell of support to do the proposed project. The questionnaire and the letters from the community members overwhelmingly support alternative 1. And I kind of feel like the proposed project feels a little bit like, you know, the county flood control is going to do an experiment and Ross is going to have a flood retention park, and, you know, let's see what happens based on the comments that Bill raised with the modeling. It's concerning. So I think, alternative one does provide significant flood benefits. It enhances wildlife by adding the fish pools. It's much more cost effective than the proposed project. It does not denude Frederick Allen Park by removing well-established trees. It's much less disruptive and avoids an estimated 7-month construction period. It's more environmentally friendly, and it's consistent with the feedback that we've received from the community. So I would support alternative one.
Thank you. Councilmember Breckus.
Thank you. I support what's been said already, but I just also want to add, if this were a project like, someone redesigning their home and landscaping, and we could bring it back a few more times and tinker with it, I could actually envision getting behind this, because at the end of the day, I say these walls are not going to last forever, and that should be in our mind. But the way that this comes to us without any real ability to tinker with it, or even, understand some of the decisions made and the alternatives possible. And then we're presented with, kind of these wildly different plans and the ability to have some input and variation on one and direction. It's really a shame. It's really a sad way to go about it. I don't know if there is some ability for the town and the county, with the funds that we have and the lack of progress being made, to get together and say, well, what if we tried this and made these changes? I mean, I assume, since this is a navigable body of water, that Army Corps has a say. On the other hand, people do creek retaining walls all the time that get approved by us and then with a few agencies. I guess I'm disappointed by the options we continue to receive. And for the reasons that both you, Elizabeth, and Julie mentioned, I'm supporting the creek, the one that does the least here, even though I could envision getting behind doing more. That's it.
Thank you. Bill or Beach, which of you? Bill, would you like to go ahead?
Sure.
Or Beach?
Yeah. I'll go ahead.
Okay.
I agree with Chris in the sense that I do think the concrete channel is ugly. Frankly, it's Stalin-esque. It reminds me of all these projects that California was engaged in, building dams and filling in San Francisco Bay and so forth. And of course, the Corps of Engineers had planned to just continue the concrete channel all the way up to Fairfax. And that was blocked, as I understand it, in part by community action. So it's a little ironic in a sense that we now have a proposal to remove that concrete channel and restore it. But that's controversial because a new ecosystem has established itself in the meantime. But I have to say, everything else being equal, I probably would support going back to a natural channel. The problem is everything else isn't equal anymore. There's been a change in the status quo. We have a new ecosystem. And I walked the park again today. I've done it so many times, looking at it, trying to envision it. And I remember the first time I walked through the park thinking about this, and I thought, it just doesn't fit here. We can't fit all this into the space we have. And for example, the way the path goes over towards the town and the businesses and so forth, at some point, the path is just, 10 feet away from those buildings there. And if there were more room, you could plant more trees there and so forth. I just think this park that's being proposed would not fit into that space. And I do agree with the comments that in the meantime, the whole park will look pretty bare. My wife and I bought a house years ago down in Southern California. It was a new house. It had just been constructed, so there was no landscaping. And everybody had plans, and the developer had plans, and we all put our landscaping in. And for the first few years, you couldn't really see the difference. It just looked like dirt. And after about 5 years, there were some signs of life. The developer was going to put in a beautiful meadow behind our house, except that didn't work. the meadow wouldn't grow, so they had to start over and put something else in. Turns out when they did the grading, they upended some old salt deposits, and the plants wouldn't grow there. I mean, we have no idea when we dig all this up that's been there, that used to be a railroad, what we're going to find that may slow this down too. So I really do think it will be 5 to 10 years before this new park starts to look more comfortable. And when we sold our house, we had lived there 20 years. It finally started to look like a real neighborhood. After about year 10, it looked pretty good at year 20, but I don't think people really have an appetite for waiting 10 or 20 years for this to look better. And finally, when I said everything else is not equal, I'm impressed by the impacts on people who live next to the creek, particularly the people on the east side, who would face basically looking across at this desert landscape for a while. But also the residents in Poplar who are concerned about the construction noise and so forth. And then finally, the creek is, even though it's ugly, it is the devil we know. And so anyway, that's my impression. I'm probably leaning towards alternative one, although I respect Chris Martin a lot, and I do agree with him on the issue of that concrete channel. Everything else being equal, I think it should be removed. I just don't think everything else is equal.
Thank you. That leaves you, Beach.
Okay. I want to start by pointing out that this is probably literally a lifetime opportunity. I wouldn't be surprised if none of us who are at this meeting will still be alive the next time that an issue like this comes in of this magnitude to the town of Ross comes into being. We have a chance now to go for park improvements or decide that the park improvements aren't worth it and we're going to settle just for the certain flood control benefits that we get from merely removing the fish ladder. I guess I'm in a very small minority. I think in the long haul, doing the preferred project would ultimately produce a better park for Ross than we have now. We would have to pay some costs. We would have to put up with some things to get it there. But I think in the long haul, it would be better than what we have now. Our park right now consists of a bicycle and pedestrian path alongside the creek. On one side of that path are a few benches and tables. On the other side of that path are a chain link fence and a few bushes and trees. I think some of our discussion has got us off the point in talking about just how long would it take to have this improved park. When we originally started talking about this, we were talking about 10 years. Then somehow it slipped to 20 years without anybody ever really justifying that slip. And in one of the correspondences that we got this week, the correspondent is now talking about 20 years or more. When you look at those figures for growth of the trees, that would be the replacements, it appears to me that it's not going to be any 20 years. And also, it's not going to be that for 19 years we have a bald park and suddenly on January 1st of one year we wake up and we have all this magnificent growth. That's not the way it works. And I think that within a relatively short number of years after the replanting, we would have a pretty nice looking park. However, I know that most of the residents who responded, I take note of the fact that most of the residents who responded and the people who have properties in the immediate area want to leave the park alone. If it were my choice, I would do the park renovation. And as I've already said, I think we'd get a better park while still getting significant flood relief. So I think that leaves me in the position of reluctantly supporting the desires of the residents of this town and going along with just doing the fish removal and not doing the plan, not accepting the plan that requires, that would result in some improvements in the park. So I'm going to be voting for alternative 1 to do the fish ladder without doing the park.
Thank you. Would anyone, Joe, are we taking a vote on this, or is this, we're taking a vote? So are there any other comments before I ask for a motion? Then would someone like to make a motion as far as preference for the flood project?
Move to approve alternative number 1.
Second.
All right, let's take the vote. How do you vote, Councilmember Breckus?
Aye.
And Councilmember Kircher?
Aye.
And Councilmember Cool?
Aye.
Councilmember McMillan?
Aye.
And Mayor Robbins?
Aye.
Okay, the vote is unanimous for alternative 1.
Thank you. Item 13, Patrick will be presenting our annual housing element progress report. So the town planner, Patrick Streeter.
Thank you, Mayor Robbins, members of the council. So this is a brief presentation. It's our annual housing element progress report. This is for the year 2020. So basically, planning law requires every town and city to provide a status report to the Department of Housing and Community Development each year on the progress of their adopted housing element in their general plan. The reason and in addition to the report that's provided to HCD, we also present it to the council at a public meeting to give members of the community the opportunity to understand where we are in the process and provide comment on the housing element and its implementation. The current housing element that we have in place was adopted in 2015 and goes through the year 2023. Essentially, there's the regional housing needs assessment that this document responds to, and it's each jurisdiction's responsibility for providing housing to meet the needs of the region, basically. And it's divided into different income levels. And so for the town of Ross and this last cycle of the housing element, or the last cycle of RHNA, we were tasked with providing 18 new units. The majority of those being the extremely and very low income units, but then also a fair number of low, moderate, and above moderate income units. So this is our progress as of this point. We've pretty effectively implemented the housing element to respond to that allocation. We've covered all. This table shows all of the building permits that have been issued. So these are projects that have been approved and are now in various stages of construction or completed construction. And as you can see, our requirements for very low income have been covered, and there are only there's one low income unit and 2 above moderate income units that would be necessary in order to complete that allocation. And it's worth pointing out that we've fulfilled our obligation for RHNA in that we adopted a housing element that showed how we could accommodate these new units. So there's no penalty for not providing those units. The responsibility for each jurisdiction is to show in your general plan how you can provide those units. For jurisdictions that fall short of meeting those RHNA numbers, there is legislation that can it's not a penalty, but they can take away local control for permitting new housing units if you're not meeting your RHNA numbers. So in a nutshell, we've had 15 units approved in our current cycle, so we're about 83% through the cycle. We're about 2/3 through that that time period, so we're ahead of the game there. We did lose a unit during that period, which is the loss of the unit at 6 Redwood. And as I mentioned before, we have 1 low income unit and 2 above moderate income units. If those are completed, we'll have fulfilled that RENA allocation, or that housing allocation. We currently have 10 units that are in various stages of planning review, and it does cover those income categories. So it's anticipated that by 2023, the town will have constructed more than our allocation. But following 2023, we will be entering cycle 6 of our housing allocation. It's already in Southern California. Many of the jurisdictions have already entered this next housing cycle. And as you can see from this table, the numbers are substantially larger that each community is being tasked with providing. So these are not set in stone yet, but it does look like the direction we're going is that Ross will be responsible for showing in our general plan how we can provide 111 units or a number around that over the next 7 years after it's adopted, beginning in 2023. So it's quite a task before us. The various jurisdictions in Marin County are pooling our resources to look at performing outreach and drafting up these documents as we kick off the housing element update cycle, which will likely be occurring in the coming fiscal year for Ross. And so, as I mentioned before, our responsibility is not to provide 111 new units. Our responsibility is to show how through zoning and available land in the town, those units can be provided. I'm guessing the majority of them will be through our accessory dwelling unit ADU implementation, but with only 800 and something properties, it's still going to take a lot of ADUs to get near these numbers. So it'll be a bit of a planning adventure over the next coming years. But for the 18 units that we were tasked with for the previous cycle, we are on track. And that concludes staff's presentation. I'm available for any questions.
Thank you, Patrick. Are there any questions from council members? Let's see, I can't see Julie in this.
I can stop my screen share.
Well, that's good. Then I can see everybody. Great. Questions? I mean, I'll have a comment. I mean, obviously, the numbers that we're looking at going forward are, we only have 800 units. I don't know how we go up to 111 more, but I guess we'll just see how that unfolds. One question is, if we exceed our numbers for this cycle, can some of those excess ones count for the next cycle?
No, as I'm aware, there's no rollover for. It's a two-way street. So also we're not indebted if we don't make it to those 18 units. But the same thing, if we provide more units than we're asked for this previous cycle, it doesn't carry over into the next cycle.
Okay. Other questions? Well, thank you very much, Patrick. One question, do council members want to take a 5-minute break or should we keep going? What's your preference? A 5-minute break?
Mayor, if I may, before we take a break, can you just make sure there's no public comment for this item?
Oh, yeah, sorry. Would any members of the public like to comment on the annual housing element progress report? And if so, please raise your hand and Linda will call on you.
All right, I'm bringing in David Peterson. Go ahead, David, unmute yourself.
Okay, you hear me?
Yes.
I was wondering, in your presentation, you talked about building permits issued. Is there any category for units legalized, that pre-existed, didn't have necessarily a building permit, but there's, second units around town? I remember back when these allocations first started coming out 15, 18 years ago, and Ross no one in the county was making their quotas. And I went to a council meeting and said, I know of at least 4 units that aren't on our records that belong to council members. And if you just make those legal, we meet half our requirement at the time. So there are units around town that may or may not be registered as ADUs that we might be able to count toward our quota. That's my comment.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Any other comments from members of the public?
Any Mayor? Nope.
All right, then let's take a 5-minute break. It's 8:27, so let's come back.
Mayor, if I may, it looks like there is a hand in the.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
I wasn't there a minute ago.
Uh,
Peter Barry.
Oh, good. Okay.
So I get to talk again. I just want to congratulate the council on a great job. I saw you guys were very sensible about the renaming of Drake and now this, and I just think I'm so impressed by the quality of people we have on the council. Especially that old judge down there. He's got a very keen mind still. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Linda, are there any other attendees, members of the public who have their hands raised?
I do not see any, Mayor.
Okay, so it's now 8:28, so how about 8:33?
All right, I'll be pausing the recording while we take a break.
Thank you.
Okay. All right.
So now we're at item 14, which is the town manager updated council discussion of town activities in response to COVID. Joe.
Thank you, Mayor. This should be pretty brief. As one of the speakers mentioned, the CDC, I believe it was just today, said facial coverings need not be worn inside for people with vaccinations. Now, that being said, the California Department of Public Health has not said that yet. They're not there yet. Just so you know, Marin County and the counties in the state follow the Department of Public Health. That being said, there's indications they'll be there soon. And one of the issues that's going to come up, and we're all employers, indoor employers such as us and office buildings and others, are waiting for guidance then from Cal OSHA. Cal OSHA is to be changing the restrictions finally next week. Now, that being said, right now the rule is, well, you can work, it sounds like you can work in a place if everybody's been vaccinated without masks inside. But what happens if somebody isn't vaccinated or public comes into the place? So everybody's going to be waiting for the Cal OSHA rules. What do you do if not every single person's been vaccinated or doesn't vaccinate or a public comes in? That being said, obviously things are moving in a good direction. Obviously illnesses, deaths way down. Marin has the highest vaccination in the state. We're at 86% of the population over age 16 has at least one dose. 62% are fully vaccinated. We started the vaccinations for 12 to 16-year-olds has already started in Marin County. The public health officer's goal is to get 90% of people ages 12 plus vaccinated. And we'll see if, obviously that's the willingness and does everybody want to be vaccinated to get there. But that's the update.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for Joe? Then let's move on to item 15, and I am recused from this item since I live within 500 feet as the crow flies of this property. So Vice Mayor Pro Tem Cool will lead this item, and I will stop my video.
Okay, item 10 is a review of a plan for 10 Ames Avenue. Matthew, do you have a report?
Matthew, you're muted.
Thank you. Please let me start over. Thank you, Pro Tem and council members. Matthew Weintraub, planner. I'll be referring to my presentation here on the screen. The item before you is the Costello residence at 10 Ames Avenue. The owners are Dan and Carly Costello. The applicant is Imprints Landscape Architecture. Here on the location map, we see that the property is located at the end of the Ames Avenue cul-de-sac on the west side of Shady Lane. And some property characteristics of this property. It is just shy of the minimum lot size for the district. It's a relatively flat lot. The constraining factors on this property are the irregular shape, which includes a very narrow lot frontage, very narrow front yards and side yards, and then a lack of lot depth, which also limits the rear yard area. So the application of side and rear yard setbacks leaves very minimal area within the developable envelope. I'll also point out the prevalence of existing pools in this neighborhood. We have one pool here, one pool here, one pool here. All of them appear to be non-conforming with respect to the rear yard setback. On this property, there's a pool in this area not shown, but there's also a sport court non-conforming in the rear yard. And on this property here at the bottom, also an additional pool. Some property history. Clearly, there's been variances issued for the subject property, primarily for setbacks, and indicating that the constrained nature of the lot basically requires some variance to be issued for nearly any type of development. The existing project site includes the single-family residence at the center of the lot, occupying pretty much most of the buildable envelope at the moment. And two rear yard accessory structures in the corners and a rear patio as well. The proposed project would construct a new linear pool, partially within the side yard and rear yard setback, but primarily located as much as possible within the buildable envelope that remains open. It would also have an extended patio and a fire pit that would go back into the rear yard. Would not be any closer than 10 feet from any side property line or rear yard property line. We also see the new pool equipment enclosure would look like this. The pool equipment would actually be located adjacent to the house, at least 25 feet from the side yard property line with conforming setbacks. And also to offset the increase in impervious coverage, a new permeable driveway would replace the existing impervious driveway to offset that coverage increase. The Advisory Design Review Board group reviewed the project and recommended approval of the project on April 20th, 2021. After the ADR group reviewed the project and subsequent to the council's consideration, the owner of 11 Southwood requested some minor modifications to the project, including additional plantings at the rear property line for screening, and not extending the existing decking at the guest house. They also requested painting of the existing guest house to a darker color. In consideration of those requests, the applicant has revised the plan. So here we see the original plan on the left, the revised plan on the right. We see on the revised plan a new row of proposed English laurel plantings up to 12 feet high that would provide the requested screening along the rear property line. We also see in the proposed plan the existing deck. This is how the existing deck is in the current condition, as opposed to the original plan, which included extending that deck further into the rear yard setback. So again, no deck work proposed. The owner at this time is not proposing to paint the existing pool house. So they've basically taken the owner up on 2 of the 3 requests. So the key issues to consider for the council are the variance request. There are special circumstances, which is the irregular lot shape and the restricted allowable development envelope. This is evidenced by the previous issuance of variances on the property for normal development. And also the fact that non-conforming pools and patios are not uncommon in the area, as previously shown. With respect to privacy and screening, the neighbors' concerns appear to have been addressed by the revised project, including the additional landscape screening and omitting the deck extension, as well as the ADR group's recommendation of approval. And lastly, or actually not lastly, second to last, stormwater management. The project would reduce the overall impervious coverage by replacing the driveway with new permeable paving. And so the post-development stormwater runoff would not be greater than pre-project rates. And last, a key issue that has recently come up are the drought restrictions in place by the Marin Municipal Water District. Currently, MMWD is requiring all recreational pools and spas to be covered when not in use to reduce the amount of water evaporation. The proposed pool has an automatic cover. The MMWD Board of Directors may implement additional restrictions on filling and/or topping off pools and spas if the drought conditions worsen. Staff recommends that this is not a restriction on the ability of the town to approve new pools, but it is something that, that owners should be aware of once they do construct pools. And the complete water rules are available for the public to look at this website, the MMWD website. So the permits required for the project include design review for an activity or project resulting in more than 50 cubic yards of grading, and a variance to allow for the construction of the new pool and associated patios, patio structures, and I should remove decking. Decking is no longer proposed, that encroach into the minimum required west side yard and rear yard setbacks. And staff's recommendation is to adopt resolution number 2200, conditionally approving design review and variance to construct a new 520 square foot pool and associated patios and patio structures and mechanical equipment enclosure at the west side of the existing single family residence at 10 Ames Avenue. That completes my presentation. I'm available to answer any questions. I believe the applicant, Stacy Jorgensen with Imprints Landscape Architecture may also be on the line. And I believe Dan Costello, the owner, is also on the line. Thank you. And I'll now stop my screen share.
Does any member of the council have any questions for Matthew?
I do.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to make sure that the resolution that you have, you said that there's no, they made a change to the decking, I think going into the side yard, right?
Correct.
And the resolution that you have that is recommending everything but the painting. I just wanted to understand what you have as a resolution. You're going to modify that one provision.
Yes, and in fact, an updated resolution has been provided that references the updated plan sheet. So by incorporation, that plan sheet is referenced. And so there's no actual special conditions necessary because the plan sheet does include the landscaping as well as omitting the deck. The plan sheet, the plans do not include painting the structure, and staff is not recommending that that's necessary at this time. So that is not included.
Okay, thank you. That's it.
Does any other member, Julie?
Thank you. Matthew, have we heard from the adjacent neighbor as to whether they're satisfied with the additional landscape screening?
Yes, I've communicated with the owner of 11 Southwood this afternoon, and they indicated they reviewed the revised plan and indicated that it did meet their satisfaction. They wanted to be sure that the plantings would indeed grow up to the 12 feet height and would be at least approximately 8 feet at installation. My understanding is that a 15-gallon tree would be approximately 8 feet at installation, and then they would grow up to 12 feet.
Great, thank you.
Does any other member of the council have any questions for Matthew? If not, we'll permit the applicants to make a presentation if they wish to do so. You're entitled to a total of 15 minutes. You can use it all in one blast, or you can hold off some of it and use it for rebuttal at the end of other aspects of the case. Does the applicant wish, or the owner wish, to make any presentation in support of the application?
Matthew, who do you say was the architect?
The architect is Stacy Jorgensen of Landscape Architecture. The owner is Dan Costello. And I believe I see Dan Costello.
Okay, well, I have someone with their raised hand here, but Dan Costello is not.
So
Yeah.
Brad is probably Brad of Imprints Landscape Art.
Okay, so I'll go ahead and bring him in. Go ahead, Brad.
Yeah, just okay here. Hi, I'm actually out of town, but I'm just here really to answer questions. I think Matthew did a great job with his presentation, and it's a straightforward project, and hopefully people got to go to the job site and see the staking of the pool. And I'm really here just to answer questions because I do think it's a pretty straightforward project, and we presented at ADR and received unanimous approval. So I'm really just here to answer questions.
Does any member of the council have any questions for the applicant? Seeing none, we'll open the matter up to public comment. Is there any member of the public who wishes to speak for up to 3 minutes with regard to this particular project?
No hands are raised.
Okay, then we'll bring it back to the council for deliberation, for a comment and deliberation. Does anyone want to speak with regard to this project? Seeing none, I think we're in a position to entertain a motion.
I move to approve 10 Ames Avenue design review and variance. Approve resolution number 2200.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay,
All right. Let's take the vote. Councilmember Breckus,
Aye.
Councilmember Kircher,
Aye.
Councilmember McMillan,
Aye.
and Councilmember Cool.
aye.
And the motion passes unanimously.
All right, and it looks like we have our mayor back already and ready to roll.
So now,
Thank you.
thank you. So now we're on item number 16, 11 Morrison Road, design review, hillside lot permit, nonconformity permit, demolition permit, and accessory dwelling permit. Matthew, would you like to go ahead and present this project?
Yes, thank you, Mayor and council members. I think I have both my audio and video working. So this is a new residence at 11 Morrison Road. The owners are an LLC, and the architect is Matthias Hoist. I believe I got close on the last name. The project is located east of Laurel Grove Avenue in the Upper Hill area, part of town. And here are some property characteristics. The lot size is a 67,000 square foot lot in a 5-acre district. It is very steep. It has a 50% average slope, so it is a hillside lot subject to those restrictions. It currently has 4,212 square feet of permitted existing floor area. So that is what's proposed to carry over to the new project. Property history is pretty slim as far as the town files. We have some development dates for the county, but no planning permits in the town files. The existing project site contains a single family residence and attached 2-car carport with a pool and a shed structure. The project proposes to demolish the existing residence, accessory buildings, pool, paving, etc. Basically remove the existing development from the lot and redevelop the lot. The proposed project would construct a new residence, a detached ADU, a new pool, driveway, and landscape. All the components would be in approximately the same location as they are now on the lot, with some minor changes and updates and modernizations. And I will actually go through these drawings fairly quickly, and then I believe the architect Matthias would like to spend a little more time going through the project with you. So the project proposes to do a stepped development, modular development, stepping down with the hillside. The project would actually be sunken into the hillside. So there would be some excavation, grading and excavation required to do that. As shown in the top picture here, all the new development would be located pretty much under the roof line of the existing property. So there would be no no development taller than what we see existing on the property. And then here are some additional renderings and materials, an axiometric view giving a sense of the depth and the modularity, as well as the earthen materials and the naturalistic materials that would be used. The planting plan involves revegetating the property after removing some trees, which would be required to create defensible space per the fire department's requirements around the new residence. The site would be revegetated to the greatest extent feasible while respecting that defensible space, and any remaining tree requirement would be met through the town's in lieu fee, which would cover the town's requirements. The advisory design review group reviewed the project on April 20th, and they recommended approval with some minor revisions. The first revision was that they recommended omitting a proposed elevated gazebo at sort of the tail end of the development, which was not really fully designed or integrated into the project. This is the feature that's circled here. So this is not part of the project any longer. The project ends with the pool. And they also recommended upgrading the pool material in this location from a wood lattice to a higher grade material such as woven wire mesh. And we can see that woven metal screen is now that material. So the applicant has gone ahead and updated the project plans consistent with the ADR group's recommendations. A public comment was received from the owner of 5 Morrison Road. He did request repair of Morrison Road following construction. This is required by condition of approval 9T. So this request should be met through the town's requirements and conditions. And key issues for the council to consider are the hillside lot standards and guidelines. As detailed in the staff report, all of the special hillside guidelines and regulations, most particularly applying to setbacks, retaining wall standards and planting requirements are met by the project. And that's detailed in the written staff report. There would be some excavation and off-haul, which would be required to sink the new house into the hillside to provide for that low level profile that's proposed. So there would be some off-haul of material. And in terms of floor area, there would be no increase to the existing legal non-conforming floor area. In fact, there'd be a slight reduction. The project would actually leave 3 square feet of legal floor area on the table. So it would be slightly less than current. Stormwater management, the project would also reduce the impervious coverage on the property from its existing state. So post-development stormwater runoff rates would be no greater than pre-project rates. And the last key issue is the key issue mentioned previously with respect to pools and MMWD's current requirements to cover all pools that are constructed, and that there may be additional restrictions on filling in or topping off pools in the future if the drought conditions worsen. Again, staff recommends that this is not an issue with approving pools, but it's an issue with, it's something that owners should be aware of once pools are constructed. So the permits required and requested are design review permit and hillside lot permit. There are several criteria that require those permits, but the primary criteria is that there's a new building being constructed exceeding 200 square feet that triggers both of those permit requirements. A nonconformity permit is required to allow for the reconstruction of the existing nonconforming floor area, again, without increasing total square footage of nonconforming floor area. A demolition permit is required to demolish the existing dwelling, and an ADU permit is required to construct a new ADU along with the single family dwelling. Staff would also mention that the ADU itself appears to meet all the ministerial requirements for an ADU. So if the ADU were proposed separately on its own, it would be a ministerial approval. So staff's recommendation is to adopt resolution number 2201, conditionally approving design review, hillside lot permit, nonconformity permit, demolition permit, and ADU permit to demolish the existing residence and accessory structures and construct a new 4,209 square foot 2-story with basement single family residence, including attached 2-car garage, and construct a new 796 square foot detached ADU and rehabilitate the existing landscape and hardscape. This concludes my presentation. I'm available to answer questions, and I do believe Architect Matthias would like to also present his presentation and share more information about the project design and background with you.
So Matthew, is that presentation to be before we ask questions of you?
Whatever your pleasure is.
Why don't we keep our usual format? That is, let's see if there are questions for you, and then the owner and applicant will have 15 minutes to use however they want to present and to answer further questions. So let's start with the council questions from council members to Matthew. Council member Macmillan.
Thank you. Matthew, it looks like the pool is not a rectangle, so I'm just wondering how they're going to cover it.
That's a good question. I think that's best answered by the architect. So I would ask him to refer to that when he provides his presentation.
Great, thanks.
Are there other questions? So Matthew, I have one, which is with the dining room being elevated the way it is, does the space under that also count as FAR, or is that just sort of there? You know, I mean, it kind of seems like it's a two-story structure there, and it should count as FAR underneath and the dining room, but I'm not sure that it's being counted that way. How does that work with an elevated structure like that?
So the space is not currently counted as floor area. It's not proposed to be counted as floor area. It's enclosed on sort of two sides at the most. So it's not really an enclosed space. If we look at the definition for floor area, it does provide for porches that are covered porches with a depth of greater than 10 feet are also counted as floor area. I would not consider this to be a porch area. I would consider this to be really just an open area underneath a vaulted structure. There's clearly no actual enclosure to it. So staff's recommendation is that it doesn't count as floor area.
Okay, thank you. And then I have one other question. This has to do with the trees and the in lieu tree fee. If a property, if an owner is removing trees for clearance, you know, for fire purposes, do we require in lieu tree fees in that situation?
By the strict definition of the code, yes, we do. We would require tree replacement really for any reason. The Public Works has some discretion in the amount of tree replacement requirement based on the conditions of the property. For instance, if a property simply isn't suitable to have a certain amount of revegetation, the Public Works Department would either charge the in-lieu fee, or they theoretically could make a discretionary call and waive some portion of that. But the general policy is that an owner is responsible for replacement of any tree removal for whatever reason.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Breckus.
I wanted to follow up on that question you asked about how much covered area is there that is enclosed by two sides? What is the depth and what is the width?
I would have to refer to the plans for the exact dimensions. I do know that the area is deeper than 10 feet. If the question is, you know, is it deeper than 10 feet in terms of that definition of the code, it is clearly deeper than 10 feet. But I would say that it doesn't qualify as a covered porch structure. It simply qualifies as an open area underneath the structure, underneath the vaulted structure.
I just think that seems, I mean, I don't know that we've had a design like this, so I'm kind of trying to think of, the only one I can think of is the one up on Winding Way that this came up with, but it wasn't like it was, well, yeah, it was an area created by virtue of an upper floor hanging over the bottom. It was at ground level, but the application we used at that time was that did count as floor area, and it logically should, because, for example, if I wanted to extend some kind of covered area outside my house, whether it had a floor above it or just was a covered area. I don't know why logically that would actually make any difference. You know, it's not different just because, I mean, it's not different because it's on a hillside. It's not different because you create some kind of balcony. I mean, it's still kind of a covered area. I'm just pointing this out because I feel like that's kind of a strange, I don't know how logical that is to just exempt it because they architecturally decided to create that space by having a floor hang over it. I mean, that's how anybody would do it to create such a space.
So I think the definition of floor area ratio in the code provides some guidance. It says that for the purposes of determining allowable floor area of a lot, the floor area is the sum of the gross horizontal areas of the several floors of the building or buildings measured from the exterior faces of the exterior walls. So that requires that there be exterior faces of exterior walls to measure that from. And so there has to be some level of enclosure that would provide for that.
Well, but so we've applied this to a balcony, which I know had 3 sides. Are you making a distinction based on the fact that there's just 2 sides, or are you making the distinction on the fact that it's not, the space then isn't enclosed?
I would make the distinction primarily based on the fact that there's only 2 sides and that you cannot measure the dimensions from, you know, between exterior walls if there are no opposite walls.
So 3 sides, it's no go, but by virtue of 2 sides, that changes the analysis. I'm just trying to get your reasoning because I can already think of myself thinking that's not how, that doesn't seem quite right.
I would say that's a general rule of thumb. I would say it is, you know, one has to look at each situation individually and look at how the architecture is being used and how the site is being developed. Staff simply doesn't see that lower space as an area that would be enclosed, that would actually be, you know, that would actually be considered indoor living area.
I mean, but they could put a dining room set, they could have a whole dance floor under there. I mean, it's as much, I guess I'm just putting it forth to the council. I don't really see that as being that logical of a distinction.
Is there a floor or tile or stone or something proposed for the dirt there? What is it? Is it going to be level? What happens to that? You know, the base of it.
My understanding it's a level finished floor, similar to an outdoor patio. It would be essentially an outdoor patio space that has the structure sort of vaulted above it. Is how I would characterize that.
If they put a barbecue in it, does that count it as a space, you know, as a FAR?
No. A barbecue, you know, on an outdoor patio does not create floor area.
Uh-huh.
It would be a story though, under our definition, but.
There's already a story at that level.
Yeah, so that doesn't.
Right. And it's counted as building coverage because it's included underneath a building. So it's already counted as building coverage.
What about the definition of mezzanine?
So a mezzanine is an indoor structure essentially. So if one had like a 2-story vaulted space and then a mezzanine extended across part of the 2nd level, the mezzanine itself would be counted as floor area, whereas the 2-story vaulted space itself without the mezzanine would only be counted as floor area at the ground floor.
Mm-hmm. And our definition of porch, it doesn't qualify there.
Let's see, porch means a roofed structure projecting from the exterior wall of a dwelling for the purpose of providing shelter for an entrance. So no, I don't believe it does meet that definition.
Because what, you can't go into the house from that area?
There may be an entrance, but I don't think the specific intention is to, and further reading the porch definition, I don't think the intention is to provide an architectural transition between the interior of a residence and a yard. So again, I don't think it's a porch structure as designed and as intended.
I don't know about that. I mean, those arches are really pretty and they kind of create that transitional space. I don't know. I mean, I'm sorry, I actually didn't think of this until this meeting when Elizabeth asked her question. And then I was thinking, gosh, there is a lot of that. And I don't think that we've seen it like that. And when we have, we've considered, I remember the Hardys were the ones on Winding Way, and we made them shrink their balconies. I think we did the same for the Pickards over in the Winship Park area, because we said that's too big of an outside area that you created, like a balcony. So I just don't see two sides versus three sides being that different. It still has the sense of an enclosed mass.
Yeah.
Do we have any idea how much it would be, what the square footage would be if we counted that kind of space?
The architect may be able to provide that detail.
Okay.
Councilmember McMillan.
Matthew, I just have another question about basically the construction management. I know you said that they have to repair the road. And I assume that means the private road, or does that mean also the public road? Both?
Both, either
Okay.
or both, yeah.
And, you know, there's going to be a ton of workers up there and huge vehicles, and you can't park on that street. Where are they going to park?
So there is actually a fairly large off-street parking area proposed as part of this. And my understanding is that would be cleared and used for the worker parking as part of the project as well. So there would be opportunity to park on site while the project is being constructed. I think the architect also should be able to provide some further detail on the construction management plan as well.
Okay. Thanks.
Are there any other questions for Matthew? So then let's let's move on to the architect's presentation. And again, the architect and family owners have 15 minutes total, and it can be divided up in any way you want, all in the presentation or some in the presentation, and then sometimes saved for questions and rebuttals or whatever. So Matthias.
Yeah, Matthias.
Matthias, I'm so sorry, Matthias.
Yeah, thank you for taking your time. I know this is late. This is towards the end of the presentation, and thank you, Matthew, for a very great presentation that that covers a lot of the area and a lot of the project. So I think I don't have to go over as much detail as I thought I have to, because Matthew really did a great job, and I believe you all have seen the sites. So I'll try to come right to your questions. One question by Julie about the pond, this is not your natural, this is not your regular swimming pool. This is not a sort of a blue bottom pool. This is a natural pond in which you can swim. It's a concept that's more common actually in Europe, and so there will be a regenerative zone in it. We're talking about some plants in there as well. So I think in order to cover it, we probably have to have some sort of at least a partial custom cover, but we have to look into that. I don't know exactly how that is done. I know that evaporative cooling or evaporative loss of water is an issue, but we also see benefits to actually have a body of water over there. This can actually also be used for fire water. So this pond is part of the defensive zone as well, but obviously it's also a swimming pond. About I don't know, I think I can speak to the elevated dining room. It's interesting, the ADR group seemed to actually receive it pretty well. They seem to like it. I know it's a quirky little design feature. My client does like the idea of trees. Trees are sort of a very important element on the site. She wants to preserve as many as possible. This is in a way, this is sort of a tree house that we're looking at there. So this is unusual, but it's very open to the underside. So it's really the idea that the lower patio sort of flows underneath it. And so it never came up in terms of a planning issue. And we hope that we also, the one issue that came up with was the width and bulk of the building. But we were able to show that overall the width to the west side is just about 95 feet, whereas other buildings, comparable buildings along the hillsides, can easily go to like 140, 130 feet in width and are more prominent along the hillsides. And then what was the latest? There was, I think, one more issue that we discussed. The last one I wasn't, oh yeah, parking. In terms of the construction staging, and I can, maybe I should I share the screen? That might be helpful. Let me do that here. Okay, you can see the screen, I take it. This is again back to the site plan. So the what we're proposing are actually more parking lots than are required. The existing site has a flat area here on the north. There's what I call shed 2. There are really 3 sheds on it. Shed 1 is down here, shed 2, and down at the hillside is shed 2. So we're going to use this same site to create more parking. The issue with Morrison Road is often that there's a lot of service vehicles that park there. You have construction, you have landscapers who park their trucks. You obviously have visitors. You might have staff to the that come to service the buildings. So we are actually creating more than is required. Parking lots, every time I've gone up there, I've seen that it's actually hard to get through there. So this parking area in the north, and in fact, the entire approach, the new approach to the building is going to be constructed first, and then will function as a construction staging area and area to have places for material and bring in the machinery and so on. So we're sort of working from the top down to the side. And we actually will have, before the pool is erected, we will probably also have some area down here at the bottom of the hill where we can also do some of the staging. There's an extra path. As you went to the side, you saw that went down along the side here on the southern area. So we're preserving that, and that's going to be another access to the ADU at the bottom of the site. Yeah, Matthew really covered a lot. So and you have the package, but I think for the public, it's also interesting to see what we're doing. He showed you the sections. I think that was sort of a key element. I'll go over that very quickly. Only again, we are stepping the building in plan and in sections, so it will be within the envelope of the existing building, which is also very nicely visible from the actual. We took some drone photos of the building, and the construction tape around it and the story poles show how the new building is pretty much within the footprint and the massing of the existing building. In fact, it is lower than that. The materials were discussed. I don't know if you had any questions about those, but we're going to stay with the more natural materials. The design directive really here was to create a design that had softer lines, that has certain amounts of glass, yes, because the views are pretty spectacular, that has curves. In the beginning, really started with curves, and we ended up with sort of rather than amorphous curves, so more like sort of a geometric, clearer curves, circles, half circles. You'll find this sort of quarter circles. You find that throughout the entire project. The rotunda, the entrance rotunda, and then that's actually also part of the language in this dining room that's detached. The other reason for the detachment of the dining room was that there is an access possible from the upper lot through a staircase that sort of goes underneath the bridge to the dining room and ends up on the patio, on this very large patio. And in general, the organization of the building is such that the upper floors are certainly the more public ones. You have a kitchen, dining, you have a living room, dining, and the lower rooms are the more private quarters where we have a master bedroom and 2 en suites. And then what's maybe interesting also for the public, whoever is still watching here this late hour, I did sort of visualizations of the building of the same shot, the existing building and the proposed building, and we have to remove, unfortunately, some oak trees, but generally the directive was to keep as many oak trees as possible on site. And one of the oak trees that's going, and unfortunately we can't preserve it, is tree number 14. And I try to visualize that in this way here. Tree number 19, which is also an oak, is still staying. So fortunately, that still sort of makes sure that the overall appearance of the building is a little bit more concealed. Some other shots that show you the building in a closer proximity show that we also were using extensive greening around the site. Obviously, we're replacing all 46 trees that are planned to be removed with trees on site or planters on site. We're doing a green roof on the ADU, and we have some green roof on the building and also photovoltaics. Let's see, there's another shot from the southwest, I'm sorry, to the southwest of the building that shows the entire approach. Now, in these renderings, what you see is a little bit more sparse vegetation, but that will obviously grow in more over time. Again, back to our dining room, I was concerned about views and being too prominent in there. This slide is sort of a direct response to that because one of the trees will be removed, and so it will peek through. But so are, other buildings along the hillside will do that as well. So, here again, I think you've seen it. This is the slide that shows the overall development. Again, the green roofs, the photovoltaic roofs, your larger parking area and approach. We're doing an 18-foot wide driveway. The fire department requirements require us a 16-foot wide, actually. There will be no parking allowed along this driveway. So we'll only have the 2 parking spots inside the garage and then the 4 parking spots out here on this parking lot. And this is the approach. This is another rendering from the driveway. Again, there'll be more planting along the driveway on these retaining walls, along these retaining walls. And what was really important to the client to, as I said, preserve oak trees as much as possible. This is more stylistic here, but this is kind of our oak tree number 1 that is currently in the driveway, in which the paving literally runs right along it. And we really want to save this old oak tree here and make sure that that remains. So we're taking a white berth around it, and that should stay. So I think that is pretty much that's the presentation. I don't know if you have any other questions. In terms of materials, I think you've seen the material palette. We're looking at stone, some of the Ipe wood that is out here, used for the dining room and for the ADU, and also underside of the ceilings, and window frames, garage doors, and so on, entrance door. So the colors will all be sort of in a brown tone, in a mahogany Ipe kind of tone. And other than that, the walls of the building will be mainly a stucco color, and we are proposing briarwood. This is the 3-coat stucco tone, and there's one more stone that is used in the sort of the 2 main walls of the dining room of the main building, and that's more a basalt or bluestone that's a bit more refined, and And those are, it's a very clean, basic material palette, but all with natural stones and natural materials. And that concludes my presentation. If you have any questions, let me know. I'm happy to answer.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions from council members for Matthias? So I can't quite see everybody. Can you raise your hand, do the hand raise, and then I'll call on you? Or just talk. Any questions? Then let's open it up to members of the public. Would anyone in the audience, anyone who's attending the meeting, does anyone have any comments to make about this project? Please do the raise hand feature and Linda will call on you.
Yes, if you can stop sharing the screen so I can see.
Oh, yeah. Hang on 1 second. There you go.
There are no raised hands, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Then let's bring it back to the council for discussion and for any other questions. Matthew.
Thank you, Mayor. If I may just share a screen real quick, I have some additional information that I think may help with the council determination. This drawing here in the lower left shows that vaulted dining room area and sort of the open nature of the area below it. And you can see that, you know, the dining room is sort of appended to the main residence, and it has space on all three sides for light and air and theoretically, you know, wind, rain, all those things to flow through. So I think this particular drawing really shows that outdoor character of the area below, that it really doesn't, at least from staff's perspective, it doesn't seem to qualify as that sort of covered porch, enclosed covered porch feature. It really represents more of an outdoor patio space that has a covering over it, essentially. So, so I just thought that would be helpful, and thank you.
Thank you very much. What comments or thoughts or questions do people have? Councilmember Breckus. And you're muted.
If you turn to A901, am I correct? You look at that top picture, and is there not like two areas that are kind of this open covered? One is, I guess if you're looking at the pointing, well, it's not really pointed to, it's between 2 and 14, and that's underneath the area where you would eat, right? And that side view, Matthew, that you showed was really helpful. It is, but I just, the same area is kind of between the numbers 2 and 14 at the top, right? And then there's a second area, and I don't know what you call that. And it's not, it doesn't have a number pointed to it, but it's below 7. It says archways.
Mm-hmm.
And isn't that kind of a big area too?
So I believe you're referring to this area here.
Right.
Yes, this is also essentially a covered area. This area does not have any type of finished floor. This is natural earth and turf under here, and it's a sloped area. So so that again wouldn't meet the definition of a porch. It's not a finished space. It is counted as building coverage. This is clearly a projection of the building, and so it's counted as building coverage. But again, doesn't meet that definition of floor area for essentially an indoor living space is what really that is staff believes that is intended to refer to, with the exception of entry porches. which have that very specific architectural intention of providing an entry in or out of, a main entry in or out of the building, as opposed to just an access point. So again, in this particular version or situation, staff believes this doesn't qualify as floor area.
Thank you.
What other comments or questions do council members have? I guess, Elizabeth, hearing that, what are your thoughts about the project?
Well, I like the architecture. I like the design. It doesn't look like an obscenely large home. It looks like it's tucked in, and there's a lot of nice elements and creative space. So, I mean, I certainly like it. I was just really trying to get my head around whether it was consistent with other projects once I thought about that space. I think that picture that Matthew showed is helpful in that it's not even covered quite by two spaces, because there's like another little gap or something. But it'd be one of those projects I'd love to see it when it's done, to see if those spaces read as mass and bulk that you'd want to maybe designate as floor area if it doesn't meet that standard. And I didn't even think about that when I was looking at it previously. But with feeling like I'm not changing any precedent, I like it and can support it.
What do others think? Shall I call on somebody? I could probably support it. I mean, I'm not sure I still have some reservations about that elevated dining room, but Matthew, yes, that picture you showed, I mean, it doesn't look like, I mean, I think it seems like it's meeting guidelines or it's not meeting guidelines for space. So I think that's all probably okay. I would have preferred a more direct path to the ADU, but I've understood that it meets the requirements of an ADU. So that's not for us to say. Councilmember Cool?
I can't make my iPad work right now to get me to the resolution. Does the resolution include some kind of provision for traffic control up and down Morrison and Macon Grade when these trucks are moving dirt to dig this house back into the hill?
Yes, thank you, Councilmember Cool. There are standard conditions of approval that are proposed. I would have to find the exact condition that relates to traffic management and construction, but the standard conditions of approval do cover those things.
Well, what I have in mind here is this looks to me like one of those situations where you're going to need some personnel with radios to make this work.
And
that takes a particularized construction provision in the approval.
Yes, and that would be part of the consideration for developing a final construction management plan at the building permit stage. There's been a preliminary construction management plan submitted, which indicates they are definitely thinking about these things, but by working with staff, that would be part of the consideration.
Other comments? Councilmember McMillan.
I think we have to defer to the ADR, and they're the experts in terms of design, and they have said that this design is beautiful and they love it. And so I think we're kind of bound by that. So I think I support the project based on that.
And Councilmember Kircher, any comments?
I think it's really a very impressive design. I think it would be a huge asset to the community, and so I support it.
If there are no other questions or comments, is there a motion?
I'll move to approve the project.
Second.
All right, let's take the vote. How do you vote, Councilmember Breckus?
Aye.
And Councilmember Kircher?
Aye.
Councilmember Cool?
Aye.
And Councilmember McMillan?
Aye.
And Mayor Robbins?
Aye.
And the motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. On to number 17, which is council correspondence. Do council members have any correspondence that they would like to share? Okay, then future council items, 17B. One thing I wondered is, we discussed how to have our meetings also be videoed once we go back to in-person meetings. And that was with the understanding that we absolutely had to do something. We had to do it before we could even start meeting. It turns out that if that law passes without any further amendments, it only applies to jurisdictions that have 250,000 people or more. And so I wondered, do we want to reconsider the timing or how we do it? Does that change? I mean, I guess it's not to discuss, does that change anything, but does anybody want to talk about, are we still fine with that decision? We decided to have our meetings videotaped as opposed to a computer in the back just showing it. But we do have the option of not doing anything. And so the question is, does anybody want to talk about that and sort of either confirm what we decided or adjust it in some way? That would be, I sort of would like to, but only if somebody else agrees.
I agree. I think we ought to discuss it at our next meeting and have a plan. Is that what you're proposing, Mayor?
That's what I'm proposing, that we double check. Okay, we said we would videotape it. Is that really, now that we don't have to, do we still want to do that? Is that really the best way? Can people participate well, or is there something even different that would work better? I don't know. We kind of discussed two options because that's where we thought we were at the time, because we thought it was an assembly bill that was about to be passed.
Right.
Okay. Any other items for?
So I took it that as I heard too, to bring it to the.
Yes.
agenda.
Yes.
Very good. Yep, that'll be good for staff because we obviously want to get moving on whatever the plan is.
Okay. Anything else for the agenda? Then I will adjourn the meeting. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good vacation, Joe.
Yes, have a nice vacation.
Yeah, Joe, watch out for